The winter of 1883 came to the Montana frontier like a wolf to wounded prey, silent, merciless, and hungry for blood. Elena Cross had been walking for 3 days. Her boots, once fine leather purchased with a schoolteacher's modest savings, were now split at the seams, letting in snow with every step. The wool coat that had seemed so practical back in Helena now hung on her frame like a burial shroud, stiff with ice and offering about as much warmth. Her fingers had stopped hurting 2 hours ago, which she knew was a bad sign. The medical journal she'd once read said that numbness preceded frostbite, and frostbite preceded amputation, and amputation preceded death, at least out here, where a one-handed woman had about as much chance of survival as a candle in a blizzard. She should have been afraid. Instead, she was just tired. Tired of running. Tired of the weight of her carpet bag, which contained everything she owned in the world. 2 dresses, a hairbrush, a photograph of parents who'd died of cholera when she was 16, and a copy of Jane Eyre with her favorite passages underlined. Tired of the voice in her head that sounded disturbingly like Reverend Morton, telling her she'd brought this on herself. Disgrace, he'd called her. Corruption of innocent minds. All because she'd taught her students that the earth revolved around the sun, that women deserved the vote, and that perhaps, just perhaps, the indigenous people whose land they'd stolen had stories worth hearing. 3 weeks ago, she'd had a position, a reputation, a future. Then came the school board meeting, the accusations, the vote, the way the townspeople had looked at her like she carried plague, their eyes sliding away as she packed her belongings into a wagon that would take her exactly nowhere. "There's a train east on Friday," the station master had told her, his tone making it clear it wasn't a suggestion. But east meant admitting defeat. East meant crawling back to Boston society, where her aunt would take her in out of Christian duty and remind her daily what a disappointment she'd become. East meant spending the rest of her life as a cautionary tale, the spinster niece who'd aimed too high and fallen too far. So Elena had gone west instead, deeper into the territory, away from civilization and its cruelties. Toward what? She hadn't known, still didn't. But when you're drowning, you don't question which direction is up. You just swim. The road, if the narrow gap between snowdrifts could be called that, wound through country so desolate it seemed like the earth itself had given up. Lodgepole pines stood like skeletal sentries, their branches weighted with snow. The mountains loomed in the distance, jagged teeth against a sky the color of old bruises. She hadn't seen another human being in 2 days, not since the trapper. She pushed that memory down, locked it in the same mental box where she kept all the other things she couldn't afford to think about. The important thing was she'd gotten away. The important thing was she was still walking, until she wasn't. Her boot caught on something hidden beneath the snow, a root, a rock, the universe's casual malice, and she went down hard. The carpetbag flew from her grip, landing several feet away. For a long moment, Elena just lay there, her cheek against snow that burned like fire, and wondered if this was how it ended. Not with drama or significance, but with simple exhaustion. A body found in spring, if the wolves left anything to find. "Get up," she told herself. Her body ignored the command. "Get up, you stupid woman! Get up or die here!" With a sound that was half sob, half growl, Elena forced herself to her hands and knees. Her palms screamed as they broke through the snow's crust to the ice beneath. She crawled forward, retrieved the carpetbag, used a tree trunk to haul herself upright, and saw the lights. At first she thought they were hallucinations, her mind's cruel joke as it began to shut down. But as she blinked away the snow clinging to her eyelashes, the lights remained. Warm and yellow and impossibly real, spilling from windows perhaps a quarter-mile ahead. A building. No. Buildings. A ranch complex, sprawling and solid against the wilderness. Elena didn't remember making the decision to walk toward it. One moment she was staring, and the next her feet were moving, carrying her forward with the last reserves of strength she possessed. The distance seemed to expand with every step, the lights receding like a mirage. But she kept going because stopping meant dying, and she'd be damned if she died within sight of salvation. The main house resolved itself as she approached. A 2-story structure of rough-hewn logs and stone, built to withstand anything the frontier could throw at it. Smoke curled from 2 chimneys. Light glowed behind curtained windows. Somewhere nearby, a horse whinnied, the sound almost shocking in its normalcy. There was a gate. Iron, ornate in a way that seemed out of place in this brutal landscape, marking the boundary between wilderness and something almost like civilization. Elena's frozen fingers fumbled with the latch, but it held fast. Locked or frozen shut, she couldn't tell which. "Please," she heard herself whisper. "Please." She shook the gate. The metal rattled, but didn't give. Desperation clawed up her throat. She'd come so far. She wouldn't die here, not when warmth and safety were just yards away. Elena opened her mouth to scream for help, and collapsed. The snow rose up to meet her, or maybe she fell to meet it. The distinction seemed philosophical. The carpet bag slipped from her grasp again. Her vision tunneled, darkness creeping in from the edges. Somewhere very far away she heard barking. Dogs, maybe. Or wolves. Did it matter? This is it, she thought with strange clarity. This is how Elena Cross ends, not with fire and passion like Jane Eyre, but frozen and forgotten at a stranger's gate. Then there were hands on her, rough hands but warm. A voice deep and sharp as winter wind. "Christ, where did you come from?" Elena tried to answer, but her mouth wouldn't work. She was being lifted, no, carried. The world tilted and swayed. There was brightness suddenly, and heat, almost painful after so much cold. Voices, multiple voices, young and old, male and confused. "Papa, who is she? Is she dead? Step back. Both of you, step back now." Elena forced her eyes open. She saw a ceiling, rough timber beams, a chandelier made of antlers. She was on something soft, a sofa maybe, or a bed. Faces swam above her, a boy with dark hair and darker eyes, maybe 10 years old. Another boy, younger, his face rounder with childhood. And a man. The man was the one holding her. Ronan Hale, though she didn't know his name yet, was the kind of man the frontier carved from granite and cruelty. Tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that looked capable of bearing the weight of a collapsed barn. His face was all hard angles, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been chiseled with a hatchet, eyes the color of steel in winter. There was silver threading through his dark hair, though he couldn't have been more than 40. He wore a simple work shirt and suspenders, the sleeves rolled up despite the cold, revealing forearms corded with muscle and scarred from a lifetime of hard labor. His eyes, when they met hers, held exactly 0 warmth. "You're trespassing," he said flatly. Elena tried to speak. What came out was a rasp that barely qualified as sound. "Get water," the man ordered without looking away from her. "Lucas, the basin from the kitchen. Noah, fetch blankets from the hall closet. Move." The boys scattered. The man, she caught a glimpse of something on his hand, a ring, gold and simple, began removing her coat. His movements were efficient, almost clinical, the way you'd handle livestock. When the coat wouldn't come free of her frozen arms, he produced a knife from his belt and cut the fabric. "Expensive coat," he observed, his tone suggesting he'd already drawn conclusions about her, none of them flattering. "City made. Boston, maybe Philadelphia. You're a long way from anywhere that matters, woman." The coat fell away. He moved to her boots next, and this time his expression flickered, just for a second, into something that might have been pity. The leather had frozen to her stockings. Where the split seams gaped, her skin showed through, mottled purple and white. "Frostbite," he said. "Severe. You're lucky you still have feet." Was she? Luck seemed like a generous interpretation of her circumstances. The older boy, Lucas, returned with a basin of water. He set it down with a thump that sloshed liquid onto the floor, his eyes fixed on Elena with open hostility. "She's not staying," he announced. "Lucas, she's not staying. We don't need anyone. We don't want anyone. Send her back where she came from." "Where did you come from?" The man turned those cold eyes back to Elena. She managed one word, scratched and broken. "Helena." "Helena." He said it like it was a disease. "That's 4 days' ride in good weather. How long have you been walking?" 3. She had to stop, gather breath. 3 days. Something passed across his face. Calculation, maybe assessment. "Anyone following you?" The question landed like a blow. Elena's mind flashed to the trapper, his breath sour with whiskey, his hands reaching. She forced the memory down and shook her head. You sure about that? She nodded. The younger boy appeared with blankets, too many, an armful that he could barely see over. The man took them without thanks and began wrapping Elena with the same efficient brutality he'd shown removing her coat. The warmth of the wool against her frozen skin was agony. What's your name? He asked. Elena. Elena Cross. Well, Miss Cross, I'm Ronan Hale. This is my ranch, my house, and those are my sons. You've stumbled onto private property in the middle of a blizzard with frostbite, hypothermia, and by the look of you, about 6 hours before you would have died in the snow. He stood, towering over her. So here's the situation. Storm's not letting up for at least 2 days. I'm not a monster. I won't throw you back out tonight. But come morning, assuming you survive the night, you leave. Understood? Elena stared up at him. The warmth from the fireplace was seeping into her bones now, along with something else. Anger. Pure, clarifying anger. She'd walked 3 days through killing cold. She'd been cast out by people who'd smiled to her face for years. She'd fought off a drunk trapper with nothing but a rock and desperation. And now this man, this stranger, was looking at her like she was an inconvenience to be tolerated and dismissed. Something in her snapped. No, she said. Ronan Hale blinked. It was perhaps the first time in a decade anyone had flatly contradicted him in his own home. No, he repeated, his voice dropping to something dangerous. I said no. Elena pushed herself up on her elbows despite the spinning in her head. I'm not leaving. Miss Cross, I have nowhere to go. The words came faster now, fueled by something beyond exhaustion, beyond fear. Helena won't take me back. There's no town within a week's travel that I could reach alive. You said yourself I'd have died tonight if I hadn't found this gate. So no, Mr. Hale. I won't leave in the morning. I won't leave until I have somewhere to go that isn't a grave in the snow. Silence fell like a hammer. Lucas made a sound of outrage. Noah's eyes went wide, and Ronan Hale's face shifted. The cold mask cracked, just slightly, revealing something underneath, not warmth exactly, but maybe curiosity, or respect for audacity. You've got spine, he said finally. Stupid, but spine. Doesn't change facts. I don't need another mouth to feed, and I sure as hell don't need complications. Whatever you're running from, I'm not running. Elena cut him off, her voice steadier now. I was expelled from my teaching position for the crime of educating children with actual facts instead of comfortable lies. A teacher. Ronan's expression shifted again, this time to something unreadable. His eyes flicked to his sons, then back. Doesn't matter. My answer stands. Then we have a problem, Elena said, because mine does too. The standoff held. Fire crackled in the hearth. Wind howled against the windows. Somewhere deeper in the house, a clock ticked, marking seconds into a silence that stretched like piano wire. It was Noah who broke it. Papa, the boy said softly, she could die. Not our concern. But Papa, enough. The word cracked like a whip. Ronan turned to his sons. Both of you, bed, now. But now, Lucas. The older boy's face twisted with something between fury and betrayal, but he obeyed, stalking toward the stairs with fists clenched. Noah lingered a moment longer, his eyes moving between his father and the stranger on their sofa, before following his brother up into darkness. When they were gone, Ronan turned back to Elena. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice low and flat as a frozen lake. You'll sleep here tonight. In the morning, if you're well enough to travel, I'll give you supplies and point you toward Bozeman. It's the nearest town where a woman alone might find work. If you're not well enough, he paused and something almost like regret crossed his features. We'll reassess. But make no mistake, Miss Cross, you are not staying here. This house has seen enough trouble. It doesn't need more. He moved toward the stairs, leaving her with blankets and firelight and the crushing weight of temporary reprieve. Mr. Hale, Elena called after him. He stopped but didn't turn. Thank you, she said, for not letting me die. His shoulders tensed. For a long moment he stood there, a silhouette against the darkness of the stairwell. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the fire's crackling. "Don't thank me yet." Then he was gone, and Elena was alone. Ocho. She didn't sleep. How could she? Every time her eyes closed, she saw the gate, felt the snow pulling her down, heard the trappers laugh. Her body ached in 1,000 places, feet throbbing with returning circulation, muscles screaming from 3 days of forced march, ribs tender where she'd hit the ground. But her mind was worse, because the truth was settling over her now, heavy as the blankets Ronan Hale had wrapped around her shoulders. She had no plan. Bozeman might be the nearest town, but what then? Walk in and announce she was a disgraced teacher looking for work? Women's positions were scarce enough without scandal attached. She could try for a position as a seamstress, maybe a laundress. But those jobs went to women with references, with histories, with connections. She had nothing. The fire burned lower. Elena fed it logs from a neat stack beside the hearth, grateful for something to do with her hands. The house settled around her, wood creaking in the cold. She could hear nothing from upstairs. No voices, no movement, just silence thick as snow. Her gaze wandered the room, taking in details she'd been too frozen to notice before. It was a masculine space, functional and spare. A desk in one corner, covered with papers and ledgers. Rifles mounted above the mantel, not decorative but clean and oiled, ready for use. A few photographs in simple frames. A woman, beautiful and severe, holding an infant. The same woman, older, with a young boy beside her. The woman again, her smile fading like old ink. Dead, Elena realized. The wife was dead. That explained some things. The coldness, the hostile sun, the way Ronan Hale moved through his own house like a ghost, touching nothing that didn't serve immediate purpose. She was intruding on grief, and grief didn't welcome strangers. The night stretched on. Elena dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound. Once she thought she heard footsteps on the stairs, but when she looked, there was nothing. Just shadows and silence. Dawn came grudgingly, the windows lightening from black to gray. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world encased in ice and new snow. Elena stood on shaking legs and moved to the window. The view stole what little breath she had left. The ranch spread out in all directions. Barns, corrals, outbuildings, all connected by paths that someone had already been out clearing. In the distance, mountains rose like broken teeth against a sky washed clean by wind. It was beautiful and terrible, this land. Beautiful in its vastness, terrible in its indifference to human suffering. "You're awake." Elena spun. Ronan stood at the base of the stairs, fully dressed, looking like he'd been up for hours. Probably had been. Men like him didn't sleep in. "The storm passed," he said. Not a question, just observation. "Yes." "Can you walk?" Elena tested her weight on her feet. Pain flared, sharp and deep, but she could bear it. "Yes." "Good." He moved past her to the desk, began pulling items from drawers. A map worn at the folds. A small leather pouch that clinked with coins. A bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Food. By the smell. "Bozeman's here." He tapped the map. 3 days if you keep a steady pace. There's a boarding house run by a widow named Marsh. Tell her I sent you. She'll give you a room on credit until you find work. He was being generous, more than generous. It should have filled her with gratitude. Instead, Elena felt the anger from last night returning, sharper now, focused. "And when I can't find work?" she asked. "Not my problem." When Mrs. Marsh asks why Ronan Hale is sending her a strange woman, what should I tell her? His jaw tightened. "Tell her whatever you want." "The truth? That I showed up half frozen and you couldn't wait to be rid of me?" "If that's how you see it." "How else should I see it?" Elena's voice rose despite herself. "You have 2 sons who are clearly being raised without any female influence. This house is—" She gestured around. "It's cold. Not just temperature. Everything. There are no curtains, no warmth, nothing that makes this a home instead of just a building. Those boys need— Don't." The word cut like a blade. Ronan turned on her, and for the first time she saw real anger in his eyes. Not coldness, not indifference, actual rage. You know nothing about my sons, nothing about what they need. You've been here one night, and you think that gives you the right to judge? I'm not judging. You absolutely are. He stepped closer, and Elena had to force herself not to retreat. My boys have everything they need: food, shelter, education. I may not be able to give them their mother back, but I give them what matters. You think some woman who got herself run out of town for causing trouble is what this family needs? You think you can waltz in here and fix whatever you've decided is broken? The words landed like physical blows. Elena felt her face flush, shame and fury warring in her chest. You're right, she said quietly. I don't know you. I don't know your sons. I don't know what happened here, but I know what I saw last night. I saw a boy who looked at me with hatred because I'm a reminder of something he lost. I saw another boy who looked at me with hope for the same reason. And I saw a man so determined to keep the world out that he's locked himself and his children in a prison made of grief. Silence crashed down. Ronan's face had gone still as stone. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, and somehow that made it more terrifying than shouting. Get out of my house. Mr. Hale, I gave you supplies. I gave you directions. Now I'm giving you an order. Get out. Elena's hands shook as she gathered the map, the coins, the food bundle. She should have felt fear, should have felt regret for pushing too hard, but all she felt was the same reckless fury that had made her contradict him last night. She made it to the door, put her hand on the iron latch, stopped. I'm sorry, she said without turning around. Not for what I said, but for your loss, whatever it was. She opened the door. Cold air rushed in, stealing the breath from her lungs, and from upstairs came a voice, Lucas, sharp with panic. Papa! Papa! Something's wrong with Noah! Everything changed in an instant. Ronan was moving before the words finished echoing, taking the stairs 3 at a time. Elena stood frozen in the doorway, caught between leaving and what? Staying uninvited to witness a family crisis? A crash from upstairs. Lucas's voice, higher now, scared. He's burning up. Papa, he's burning up, and he won't wake up. Elena's teacher instincts overrode everything else. She dropped the supplies and ran. The upstairs hallway was dim, lit only by weak morning light from a single window. 3 doors, 2 open, 1 closed. She followed the sound of voices to the middle room. It was a child's bedroom, simply furnished. 2 narrow beds, a shared dresser, a window overlooking the ranch. Noah lay in the bed nearest the door, his small body curled beneath quilts. Ronan knelt beside him, one large hand on the boy's forehead. Even from the doorway, Elena could see the child was flushed, his breathing rapid and shallow. Lucas stood on the other side, his earlier hostility replaced by naked fear. He was fine yesterday. He was fine, and then this morning I woke up and he was making this sound, this wheezing sound, and I can't wake him up properly. Papa, what's wrong with him? Fever, Ronan said, his voice tight. Bad one. Lucas, get me cold water and clean cloths. Move. The boy ran. Elena stepped into the room. How long has he been like this? Ronan's head snapped up. I told you to leave. And your son is sick. How long? For a moment she thought he'd physically throw her out. Then Noah made a sound, a weak, pitiful whimper, and Ronan's attention snapped back to the child. I don't know. Lucas said he was complaining about being cold last night, but I thought... He stopped, his jaw working. I thought he was just making excuses not to go to bed. Elena moved closer, professional assessment overriding everything else. She'd dealt with childhood illnesses in her classroom often enough to recognize the signs. May I? Ronan hesitated, then shifted aside. Elena placed her hand on Noah's forehead. The child was burning, his skin dry and hot as a stove. His eyes fluttered, but didn't open. When she pulled back the quilts, she saw the telltale flush extending down his neck, the rapid rise and fall of his small chest. It could be influenza, she said, or scarlet fever, possibly pneumonia. Without seeing a doctor... Nearest doctor is in Bozeman, Ronan cut her off. 3 days' ride in good conditions, with snow this deep and more storms coming. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Lucas returned with a basin of water sloshing over its rim and an armful of cloths. His eyes found Elena, narrowed. What's she doing here? Helping, Elena said before Ronan could answer. She took a cloth, dunked it in the water, wrung it out, and placed it gently on Noah's forehead. The boy's eyes opened briefly, confused, unfocused, before closing again. We need to bring the fever down, she continued, falling into the calm, authoritative tone she'd used with panicked parents. Keep rotating cool cloths. Get liquids into him if he wakes, water, broth, anything. Keep him warm but not too warm. And watch for the fever to spike higher. If it does, Ronan demanded. Elena met his eyes. Then you pray it breaks on its own, because there's nothing else we can do out here. The brutal honesty hung between them. Then Ronan gave a single, sharp nod. Fine. You help with this, then you leave. Understood? It wasn't an agreement, it was a temporary truce. Understood, Elena lied. The day dissolved into an endless cycle of cold water and prayer. Noah's fever climbed through the morning, peaked at midday with temperatures that made even Elena's hands feel cool by comparison. The boy drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling for his mother in a voice so small it broke something in Elena's chest. Each time Ronan would go rigid, his face turning to stone, and Lucas would flee the room. Elena stayed. She couldn't have said why, exactly. Maybe because she recognized in this sick child the same helplessness she'd felt at the gate last night. Maybe because nursing gave her purpose, and purpose was the only thing keeping her from thinking about her own impossible situation. Or maybe, and this was the truth she didn't want to examine too closely, maybe because she could see what these three males couldn't. They were drowning in grief and masculine stoicism, and sometimes drowning people needed someone to just sit beside them in the water. You should eat, she told Ronan around noon, when it became clear he hadn't left Noah's side since the crisis began. I'm fine. You're not. When did you last have food? Miss Cross, if you collapse from exhaustion, who takes care of Noah? Who runs this ranch? Who keeps Lucas from falling apart? She stood, wiping her hands on her skirt. I'll make something. You'll eat it. This isn't a debate. She left before he could argue. The kitchen was on the first floor, a large space dominated by a cast-iron stove and a table that could seat a dozen. Like the rest of the house, it was functional and bare. No herbs hanging to dry, no decorative plates on the walls, no sign that anyone had cooked here with anything resembling joy in recent memory. Elena found eggs, bacon, bread that was only slightly stale. She set about making a simple meal, her hands moving through familiar motions while her mind raced. She should leave. She knew this. Her presence here was temporary at best, unwanted at worst. Ronan had made his position clear. As soon as Noah was stable, she'd be back out in the cold with a few coins and directions to a town that might offer her a future. And yet, she'd seen something in that upstairs bedroom. Not just a sick child, but a family bleeding from wounds that had nothing to do with fever. Lucas's fear hiding behind hostility. Noah calling for a mother who couldn't answer. Ronan's hands shaking as he wrung out cloths, trying to save a son while drowning in memories of failing a wife. They needed help, real help. The kind that didn't come from medicine or money, the kind that came from someone who gave a damn. You're still here. Elena turned. Lucas stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his expression guarded. Your father needs to eat, she said simply. He won't. He will if someone makes him. You don't know him. You're right, I don't. Elena cracked another egg into the pan, but I know what happens to men who don't take care of themselves while taking care of others. They break. And when they break, everyone around them breaks too. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then, Noah's going to be okay, right? The question was asked in the voice of a boy, not the hostile young man he was trying to become. Elena turned to face him fully. I think so, she said, choosing honesty over comfort. The fever's high, but his breathing is steady. If it breaks in the next day or so, he should recover. But I can't promise anything, Lucas. I'm not a doctor. Then what are you? Right now, someone trying to help. Why? It was a fair question. Elena considered her answer carefully. Because your brother is sick, and your father is exhausted, and you're scared. and because I know what it's like to need help and have nowhere to turn, so I'm turning toward you instead." Something shifted in Lucas's expression. Not acceptance, exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. A crack in the armor. "The eggs are burning," he said. "Damn." Elena spun back to the stove, rescued the pan just before disaster. Behind her, she heard a sound that might have been a laugh. Small, but real. When she brought food upstairs 15 minutes later, she found Ronan exactly where she'd left him, one hand on Noah's forehead, the other gripping the edge of the mattress hard enough to make the wood creak. "Eat," she ordered, setting the tray on the dresser. "Not hungry." "I don't care. Eat anyway." His head turned slowly, those cold eyes fixing on her. "You're very comfortable giving orders in another man's house. And you're very comfortable starving yourself while your sons need you. We all have our flaws." She picked up the plate, thrust it at him. "Eat, or I'll force feed you like a stubborn mule, and neither of us wants that." For 3 full seconds, Ronan just stared at her. Then, impossibly, his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. "You're insane," he said. "Probably." Elena kept the plate extended. "Eat anyway." He took it, started eating mechanically, his attention never leaving Noah. Elena returned to her position on the other side of the bed, checking the boy's pulse, his breathing, the temperature of his skin. They worked in silence, 2 strangers united by crisis. Outside, the short winter day began to fade, and slowly, so slowly Elena almost missed it, Noah's fever began to break. By evening, the crisis had passed. Noah woke properly around 6, confused and weak but coherent. He asked for water, which Ronan provided with hands that trembled slightly. He asked where he was, what had happened, why everyone looked so serious. And then, looking directly at Elena with fever-bright eyes, "Who are you?" "I'm Elena," she said gently. "I'm a friend of your father's." The lie felt heavy, but what else could she say? "I'm a stranger who nearly died at your gate and is now overstaying her welcome." "You were sick," Ronan told his son. "Very sick. But you're going to be fine now." "Promise?" The word broke something visible in Ronan's expression. He pulled Noah into a careful embrace, the kind of hug that spoke of love filtered through fear of causing pain. "Promise," he said. Lucas appeared in the doorway, his relief palpable. "He's okay?" "He's okay." For just a moment, the family held together, father and sons, bound by the simple miracle of disaster averted. Elena stood quietly, knowing she didn't belong in this picture, but unable to look away from it either. Then Ronan's eyes met hers over Noah's head, and reality crashed back. She should leave, now, while everyone was distracted by relief. Slip out before the gratitude wore off and the resentment returned. Elena made it to the stairs before Ronan's voice stopped her. "Miss Cross." She turned. He stood in the hallway, silhouetted against the lamplight from Noah's room. "You helped my son today," he said. "I won't forget that." It should have been a thank you. Instead, it sounded like an accusation, like he was angry at her for creating a debt he didn't want to owe. "Anyone would have done the same," Elena said. "But they didn't. You did." He stepped closer, and she saw the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "The supplies are still by the door. I'll add more food. And I'll write you a letter of introduction to Mrs. Marsh. It's not much, but I'm not leaving." The words surprised her as much as him. They'd appeared in her mouth fully formed, absolute. Ronan's eyes narrowed. "We had an agreement." "No, you had a decision. I just didn't argue because there was no point, but things have changed." "Nothing's changed." "Everything's changed," Elena countered. "Your son was sick and you had no one to help. What happens the next time? Or the time after that? What happens when you're the one who falls ill or gets injured working the ranch? Who takes care of Lucas and Noah then?" "That's not my concern?" "Maybe not, but it should be someone's." She descended the stairs until they were eye to eye, or as close as a woman of 5'4" could get to a man over 6 feet. "You need help here, Mr. Hale, whether you want to admit it or not, and I need a place to stay, so I'm proposing a trade." His expression had gone dangerous again. "What kind of trade?" This was it. The moment of absolute insanity or absolute clarity. Elena wasn't sure which. "Marry me," she said. The silence that followed was so complete she could hear the fire crackling 2 rooms away. Then Ronan laughed. Actually laughed. A short, sharp bark of sound with no humor in it. "You're serious?" "Completely. You want me to marry a woman I met last night? A woman I know nothing about except that she was run out of her last position for causing trouble?" "I want you to make a practical arrangement," Elena corrected. "Not a love match. Not a romance. A contract. You give me a home, a name, a place in the world. I give your sons a mother figure, your house a woman's care, and you peace of mind that someone's here if crisis strikes again. It's purely transactional." "Transactional," he repeated flatly. "Yes. And what makes you think I want a wife? Any wife, let alone one I don't love?" "Because you don't want a wife," Elena said. "That's exactly the point. You want help without emotional entanglement. You want your sons raised without having to navigate courtship or romance or any of the complications that come with actually choosing a partner. You want the benefits of marriage without the mess of feelings. And so do I." She saw the moment her words landed, saw understanding bloom in those cold eyes, followed immediately by suspicion. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you want that?" "Because I tried the world's way, Mr. Hale. I tried to be good and proper and fit the mold, and the world destroyed me for it. So now I want survival, security, a purpose. If I have to marry a stranger to get those things," she lifted her chin, "then I'll marry a stranger." Ronan stared at her for a long, searching moment. Elena forced herself to hold his gaze, to not flinch from the intensity of his scrutiny. Finally, he shook his head. "You're insane." "You said that already." "Because it bears repeating. This is—" He gestured vaguely. "This is not how people make life decisions." "Isn't it? How did you choose your first wife? Love?" She saw him flinch, pressed her advantage. "Or was it practical? 2 families agreeing it was a good match, a woman who could run a household and bear children, a man who could provide and protect? That's all I'm proposing, just without the pretense that it's anything more." "My first wife," his voice cracked just slightly, "that was different." "I'm sure it was. But she's gone, Mr. Hale, and you're here with 2 boys who need raising and a ranch that needs running and no good options for solving either problem. So you can throw me out in the morning and hope the next crisis is kinder, or you can make a deal with someone desperate enough to be useful." The brutal honesty hung between them like a sword. "This is madness," Ronan said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Maybe. Or maybe it's the sanest thing either of us will ever do." He turned away, pacing to the window. Outside, stars had emerged in a sky swept clean by wind. His reflection in the glass looked haunted. "If I agreed to this insanity," he said slowly, "there would be conditions." Elena's heart kicked against her ribs. "Such as?" "You sleep in your own room. This is a practical arrangement, like you said, not a real marriage." "Agreed. You don't interfere with how I run the ranch or discipline my sons. I'll defer to you on ranch matters, but if you're asking me to stand by while you damage your children, you can forget the entire deal." His head whipped around. "I don't damage my children." "Then we won't have a problem." Another long silence. Then, "You get no money of your own. Everything here belongs to the ranch, to the family. You'd have food, shelter, protection, but no independence." "I have no independence now," Elena said. "At least this way I'd have a roof. And if you change your mind? Decide you want out? Then I leave. Same as if you decide you want me gone. This is a contract, not a prison. Either party can end it." Ronan's jaw worked as he processed this. Elena could see him running calculations, weighing risks against benefits, trying to find the flaw in her logic. "The boys would have to agree," he said finally. "Lucas will never agree." "Then you'll have to change his mind, because I won't force this on my sons without their consent." He crossed his arms. "You have until tomorrow evening to convince them. If either one objects, the deal's off, and you leave with the supplies I already promised." It was a test. A way of making this her problem, her failure, when Lucas inevitably refused. But Elena had spent years navigating hostile classrooms and skeptical parents. She'd taught suffragette principles to girls in a town that thought women shouldn't vote. She'd defended evolution to parents who believed the Earth was 6,000 years old. One angry 10-year-old? She could handle that. "Done," she said, extending her hand. Ronan looked at her hand like it might bite him. Then, slowly, he reached out and shook it. His palm was calloused, warm, and his grip firm enough to remind her exactly how much physical power he held. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Probably," Elena agreed. "But it's my mistake to make." She released his hand and started up the stairs, exhaustion finally catching up to her now that the adrenaline was fading. "Miss Cross," Ronan called after her. She paused, looked back. "If you're still here tomorrow night," he said, "we do this immediately. No engagement, no announcements, no church wedding with half the territory watching. We ride to the nearest minister, sign papers, and it's done. Understood?" "Understood. And one more thing." His expression had gone hard again, all the vulnerability from earlier locked away. "Don't expect this to become something it's not. Don't expect me to fall in love with you, or warm up, or become the kind of husband you probably imagined as a girl. This is business. Only business. I buried my heart with my wife. What's left isn't worth your time." The words should have hurt. Instead, Elena felt an odd sort of relief. At least he was honest. At least there would be no pretense, no confusion about what this was. "I'm not looking for your heart, Mr. Hale," she said quietly. "Just a place to stand." She climbed the rest of the stairs alone. Behind her, Ronan Hale stood in the darkness, wondering what fresh kind of hell he'd just agreed to. And in the bedroom down the hall, Noah slept peacefully while Lucas lay awake, listening to everything, his young mind already building walls against the invasion to come. Outside, the Montana wind howled across frozen ground, indifferent to the bargains struck in its shadow. The deal was made. Now came the cost of keeping it. Elena woke to the sound of someone chopping wood. The rhythmic thunk, thunk, thunk pulled her from dreams of frozen gates and faceless men, dragging her into a reality that was somehow stranger than any nightmare. She lay still for a moment, taking inventory. A narrow bed that wasn't hers, a room with bare walls and a single window, muscles that ached like she'd been trampled by horses. Then memory returned in a flood. The bargain, the handshake, the impossible deadline. She had until evening to convince two boys to accept a stepmother they didn't want. The wood chopping continued, steady and relentless. Elena forced herself upright, wincing as her frost-damaged feet touched the cold floor. Someone, Ronan probably, had left her carpet bag by the door, along with a basin of water and clean towels. She washed quickly, changed into her only other dress, and braided her hair with fingers that still felt clumsy from yesterday's cold. When she descended the stairs, the house was empty. Not abandoned empty, but purposefully so. Coffee sat warming on the stove, still hot. Bread and butter waited on the kitchen table beside a jar of preserves. Someone had set a place for her, just one, with a kind of deliberate courtesy that felt more like a test than hospitality. Elena poured coffee, buttered bread, and ate standing at the window. Outside, she could see the source of the chopping. Ronan, his back to the house, splitting logs with mechanical precision. Each swing of the axe was controlled, efficient, and absolutely furious. He was working out anger on innocent wood, and the wood was losing. No sign of the boys. She needed to find them, talk to them. Somehow convince Lucas that having a stranger insert herself into their family was anything other than a terrible idea. The task felt impossible. She'd faced skeptical students before, resistant parents, even a few hostile school board members. But this was different. Lucas wasn't fighting against an idea. He was fighting to protect what remained of his broken family. Elena understood that, respected it even, didn't make her job any easier. She finished her coffee, rinsed the cup, and went looking. The ranch was larger than she'd realized. Beyond the main house stood a barn big enough to hold a dozen horses, several equipment sheds, a chicken coop, and what looked like a bunkhouse for seasonal workers. Everything was well-maintained but worn, built for function over beauty. This was working land, unforgiving land, and it showed. She found Noah in the barn. The boy was sitting in an empty stall wrapped in a quilt far too large for his small frame, watching a gray cat nurse a litter of kittens. He looked up when Elena entered, his expression wary but not hostile. Papa said I could come out here if I stayed warm, but he announced, as if expecting argument. That seems reasonable, Elena said. How are you feeling? Tired. My head still hurts a little. He returned his attention to the kittens. They were born 3 days ago. Papa said I couldn't see them until I was better, but I'm better now, so here I am. Elena crouched beside him, keeping a respectful distance. The kittens were tiny, eyes still closed, mewing softly as they nursed. They're beautiful. Mama Cat's name is Smoke, because she's gray like smoke. I named her when I was 6. Noah's voice carried the careful pride of a child sharing something important. Lucas said it was a stupid name, but Papa said it was fine. I think it's a perfect name. They watched the kittens in silence for a moment. Then Noah said, without looking at her, Are you really going to marry Papa? Elena's heart stopped. You heard that? Lucas and I share a room. We hear everything. He picked at a loose thread on the quilt. Lucas is really mad. He thinks you're trying to replace our mama. I'm not trying to replace anyone, Elena said carefully. Your mother was your mother. No one can change that. Then why do you want to marry Papa? It was the same question Ronan had asked, but coming from a 7-year-old, it demanded a different kind of honesty. Because I need help, Elena said simply. And your father needs help too. Sometimes adults make agreements to help each other, even when it's complicated. What kind of help do you need? A home. A place to belong. I lost those things and I need to find them again. What kind of help does Papa need? Elena chose her words carefully. Someone to be here when he can't be. Someone to help take care of you and your brother. Someone to make sure the house feels like a home instead of just a place where people sleep. Noah considered this with the seriousness of a much older child. Mama used to sing, he said quietly. When she cooked dinner, she would sing songs I didn't know the words to. Papa doesn't sing. He doesn't do lots of things Mama used to do. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Noah finally looked at her directly. Do you sing? Sometimes. Not very well. That's okay. Mama wasn't very good either, but it was nice anyway. He returned his attention to the kittens. I don't think I mind if you marry Papa, but Lucas will. He minds everything. I know. He's not mean, though. He just misses Mama more than I do. Or maybe the same amount, but different. The boy's face scrunched up, trying to articulate something he didn't quite have words for. Like how missing her makes me sad but makes him angry. Elena's throat tightened. That makes sense. If you marry Papa, will you leave? After, when you get tired of us. The question hit like a physical blow. Is that what you're worried about? Mama left. Noah's voice was very small. She didn't want to, Papa says. She got sick and couldn't stay. But she still left, and then everything was different. So people leave, even when you don't want them to. Elena wanted to promise she'd never leave, but making promises to children was dangerous. Instead, she said, If I marry your father, I'll stay as long as I'm wanted. And I'll tell you the truth, if that ever changes, if I ever have to leave, I won't just disappear. I'll make sure you understand why. Is that fair? Noah thought about this for a long moment, then he nodded. That's fair. The barn door slammed open. Lucas stood silhouetted against morning light, breathing hard like he'd been running. His eyes found Elena, narrowed into slits. Noah, Papa wants you back in the house. But I just got here. Now, Noah. The younger boy recognized the tone. He gathered his quilt and scurried past his brother without argument. Lucas waited until Noah was gone before stepping fully into the barn, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. Then he turned on Elena. Stay away from my brother. I was just talking to him. You were manipulating him. Lucas advanced, fists clenched at his sides. You're trying to get him on your side so Papa will let you stay. But I see what you're doing. What am I doing? You're trying to steal our family. The accusation landed with surprising force. Elena stood slowly, keeping her hands visible and non-threatening. Lucas, I'm not trying to steal anything. Liar. You show up out of nowhere, almost die on our property, which isn't our problem, by the way. And then you trick Papa into feeling sorry for you. And now you want to marry him? You don't even know him. You don't know any of us. You're right, I don't. So why? The question came out as almost a shout. Why would you want to marry someone you don't know? Why would you want to be a mother to kids who don't want you? What's wrong with you? Elena took a breath, steadying herself. She could deflect, could give him the same practical explanation she'd given Ronan, but Lucas deserved better than deflection. Do you want the truth? She asked. Obviously. I'm desperate. The word tasted like ash, but she forced it out. I have nowhere to go, no family, no friends, no prospects. I walked 3 days through a blizzard because going back to where I came from felt worse than freezing to death. And when I found this ranch, when your father didn't shoot me on sight or throw me back into the snow, I saw a chance. Maybe my only chance. So yes, I'm trying to convince your father to let me stay. And yes, I'm trying to win over you and Noah. Because the alternative is walking back into that wilderness and dying alone. Is that what you want to hear? Lucas stared at her, some of the anger draining from his face, replaced by confusion. You really have nowhere else? Nowhere. What did you do? To get kicked out, I mean. Elena almost laughed. I taught, that's all. I taught students things their parents didn't want them to know, and the parents decided I was dangerous, so they got rid of me. That's stupid. Yes, it is. But it doesn't change anything. Lucas's jaw set stubbornly. We still don't need you. We were fine before you showed up. Were you? Elena gestured around the barn. Your father works himself to exhaustion running this ranch alone. Noah was sick yesterday, and if I hadn't been here, who would have helped? You? You're 10 years old, Lucas. You shouldn't have to carry that weight. I'm almost 11, and I can handle it. Maybe, but you shouldn't have to. And Noah definitely shouldn't have to watch his older brother pretend everything's fine when it's clearly not. You don't know anything about us, Lucas shot back, but there was less heat in it now. Then tell me, Elena said. Tell me about your mother. Tell me what I'm supposedly trying to replace, because from where I'm standing, I'm not replacing anyone. I'm just trying to fill in gaps that are eating your family alive. The silence stretched taut as wire. Lucas's face worked through a series of emotions. Anger, grief, confusion, something that might have been fear. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. She was good. I'm sure she was. No, I mean, she was good. She made everything better. When Papa was angry, she made him laugh. When I was scared, she made me brave. She knew how to fix things. His hands unclenched, hanging uselessly at his sides. And then she got sick, and nobody could fix that. Not Papa, not the doctor from town, not me. She just got worse and worse until she wasn't there anymore. I'm sorry, Elena said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring her back. Lucas's eyes were bright with unshed tears. And you showing up doesn't bring her back either. You're just some stranger who's going to pretend for a while and then leave when it gets hard. And Noah's going to get hurt, and Papa's going to be even more broken, and I'm going to have to hold everything together, like I always do. The truth of it hit Elena like a slap. This child, because that's what he was, despite the adult responsibilities he'd taken on, had been holding his family together through sheer force of will. And now here she was, threatening that fragile equilibrium. You're right, she said quietly. Lucas blinked. What? You're right. I am a stranger. I might leave when things get hard. I can't promise otherwise because I don't know what's going to happen any more than you do. Elena moved closer, crouched down to his eye level. But here's what I can promise. If your father agrees to this arrangement, I won't pretend. I won't try to be your mother or replace her. I'll just be Elena, someone who lives here and helps where she can. And if you decide to hate me forever, that's your right. But I won't abandon Noah. I won't disappear without explanation. And I won't make your father's life harder than it already is. How do I know you mean that? You don't. You'll just have to watch and see if I keep my word. She stood. But I'll tell you what I told your brother. I'm not leaving unless I have to or unless I'm thrown out. And if either of those things happens, I'll make sure you understand why. That's the best I can offer. Lucas studied her with eyes far too old for his face. Whatever he saw there must have passed some test because he gave a single, sharp nod. Fine. You can stay. For now. He pointed a finger at her, the gesture almost comically adult. But if you hurt Noah, if you make Papa worse, if you turn out to be one of those evil stepmothers from fairy tales, I will make your life hell. Understood? Understood. And I'm not calling you Mama, ever. I wouldn't ask you to. And you don't get to tell me what to do. Only Papa does. Within reason, Elena countered. If you're about to do something dangerous or stupid, I reserve the right to intervene. Lucas opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Fine, but I get final say on whether something is stupid. We'll negotiate case by case. Another pause. Another assessment. Then Lucas stuck out his hand, mimicking the adult gesture he'd clearly seen 1,000 times. Deal. Elena shook it, feeling the small bones and calluses that came from a childhood spent working a ranch. Deal. They stood there in the barn, stranger and child, sealed into an agreement neither quite trusted but both desperately needed to work. Then Lucas said, Papa's going to be weird about this. About what? About you. About everything. The boy's expression turned serious. He hasn't. He doesn't let people close, not since Mama died. He's going to keep you at a distance even if you're married. You should know that. I do. And he has nightmares sometimes. He doesn't think we know, but I hear him, walking around at night, checking doors and windows, making sure everything's locked tight. Elena filed this information away. What's he afraid of? Lucas shrugged. Losing us, maybe? Or maybe just losing in general. Mama's death broke something in him, made him think nothing's safe. Thank you for telling me. Don't thank me. I'm not on your side. But his tone had softened. I'm on Noah's side, and Papa's. If you being here helps them, fine. If it doesn't, he let the threat hang. Understood. Lucas nodded once more, then turned and left the barn without another word. Elena stood alone among the hay and sleeping animals, wondering what she'd just committed herself to. Through the barn's open door, she could see Ronan had stopped chopping wood. He stood with the axe hanging from one hand, his gaze fixed on the house. Even from this distance, Elena could read the tension in his shoulders, the rigid set of his spine. She'd won over the boys, or at least reached a détente with Lucas and gained Noah's tentative approval. Now came the hard part, living up to the promises she'd made. The rest of the day passed in a strange limbo. Noah stayed close to the house, still recovering. Lucas made himself scarce, disappearing into the barn or the equipment sheds whenever Elena appeared. And Ronan maintained a careful distance, speaking to her only when necessary, and then in clipped, formal sentences that gave away nothing. Elena kept herself busy learning the house. She found where things were kept, linens in a hall closet, dishes in a cabinet with a broken latch, food stores in a root cellar that needed organizing. She swept floors that didn't really need sweeping and washed windows that were already clean, anything to feel useful while the clock ticked toward evening. Around 4, Noah appeared in the kitchen where Elena was inventorying the pantry. Papa wants to know if you can cook. Elena turned. Tell him I can cook well enough to keep people fed. I'm not a chef, but I won't poison anyone. Noah relayed this information to someone in the next room, Ronan, presumably, then returned. He says dinner is at 6. If you're making it, the chickens need slaughtering. Excuse me? The chickens. Noah pointed vaguely in the direction of the coop. If you want chicken for dinner, you have to kill one. Papa usually does it, but he's asking if you can. Elena's stomach turned over. She'd eaten chicken hundreds of times, but had never once considered where it came from or how it got from living bird to dinner plate. The closest she'd come to farm work was a school field trip to an orchard. But this was a test. She could see that clearly. Ronan was checking if she could handle ranch life, if she was tough enough to do what needed doing. Tell your father I'll handle it, she said. Noah's eyebrows rose. You know how? I'll figure it out. She did not, in fact, figure it out. The chickens, 6 hens and a rooster who regarded her with deep suspicion, scattered the moment she entered their coop. Catching one proved harder than she'd imagined. They were fast, indignant, and surprisingly strong. By the time she'd cornered a brown hen against the wall, Elena was sweating despite the cold and covered in feathers. The hen squawked its outrage as Elena lifted it, holding the bird the way she'd seen illustrated in a farm manual once, firmly but not cruelly. Now came the actual killing, which she had no idea how to do. "You're holding it wrong." Elena jumped. Ronan stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I'm managing," she said. "You're terrorizing my chickens." He stepped into the coop, and immediately the bird settled. They knew him, trusted him in the way animals trust the hand that feeds them. "Give it here." "I can do this." "Can you?" He moved closer, and Elena became acutely aware of the space, or lack thereof, in the small coop. "Have you ever killed anything before?" "No." "Gutted anything?" "No." "Plucked feathers?" "No." "Then give me the damn chicken before you hurt yourself." He held out his hands, and after a moment's hesitation, Elena transferred the bird. The hen went docile immediately, settling into Ronan's grip like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Watch," he said. What followed was a demonstration in efficiency and practiced skill. Ronan moved with the kind of fluid competence that came from years of repetition, breaking the hen's neck with a quick, clean motion that was somehow both brutal and merciful. The bird went limp instantly, no struggle, no suffering. "That's how it's done," he said, handing her the body. "Now you pluck it. Boil water first to loosen the feathers. Kitchen table for the gutting. Don't puncture the intestines or you'll ruin the meat." He started to leave, then paused. "You really didn't know how to do this, did you?" "No," Elena admitted. "But you were going to try anyway." "Yes." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval, but close to it. "Stubborn." "Practical," Elena corrected. "If I'm going to live here, I need to learn." Most women would have refused. "I'm not most women." "I'm starting to see that." Ronan studied her for a moment longer, then said, "Lucas told me he's willing to accept the arrangement. Noah never objected, so unless you've changed your mind—" "I haven't." "Then we ride out after dinner. There's a minister about 2 hours south. He's performed marriages for a bottle of whiskey and a handshake before. He'll do it." "Tonight?" "You wanted a deal. I'm offering one. Take it or leave it, Miss Cross, but decide now." Elena looked down at the dead chicken in her hands, then back up at the man who would become her husband in a matter of hours. Everything about this was insane, reckless, desperate, and yet somehow it felt less dangerous than the alternatives she'd considered. "I'll be ready after dinner," she said. Ronan nodded once and left her alone with the chicken and the rapidly approaching reality of what she'd agreed to. Dinner was a tense affair. Elena served the chicken, which, despite her inexperience, had turned out reasonably well, along with potatoes and carrots from the root cellar. The four of them sat at a table that could hold 12, leaving vast gaps of empty space between each person. Noah ate enthusiastically, complimenting the food with the earnest politeness of a child trying to make a good impression. Lucas ate in silence, his eyes moving between his father and Elena like he was watching a chess match. And Ronan ate mechanically, his attention somewhere far beyond the table. "Papa," Noah said, breaking the silence, "are you and Elena really getting married tonight?" "Yes." "Will she move into your room?" "No, she'll have her own room." "Why?" "Because that's the arrangement." Ronan's tone made it clear the subject was closed, but Noah, with the fearless curiosity of 7-year-olds everywhere, pressed on. "But married people share rooms, that's what Mama told me." "This is different." "How?" "Noah." Lucas's voice cut across the table. "Stop asking questions." "I just want to know." "It's different because it's not a real marriage," Lucas said bluntly. "It's a business deal, right, Papa?" All eyes turned to Ronan. He set down his fork with deliberate care. "It's a practical arrangement that benefits everyone involved. Elena gets a home. You boys get someone to help care for you. I get—" He trailed off, seeming to realize he'd started a sentence with no good ending. "Help," Elena finished for him. "Your father gets help managing the ranch and the household. That's all." "See?" Lucas told his brother. "Business." Noah looked between the adults, his small face troubled. "But you'll still be here? You're not leaving tomorrow?" "I'm not leaving tomorrow," Elena promised. "What about the day after?" "Not then either." "What about—" "Noah," Ronan interrupted gently, "eat your dinner." The conversation died. They finished the meal in near silence, broken only by the scrape of forks and the pop of logs in the fireplace. When the plates were cleared and washed, Ronan disappeared upstairs and returned wearing his only dress coat, still rough-spun and practical, but cleaner than his work clothes. "We should go," he said to Elena. "Weather's clear now, but that can change fast this time of year." Elena nodded. She had nothing to change into. Her two dresses were equally worn, equally inappropriate for a wedding. The absurdity of it hit her suddenly. She was about to get married in a borrowed coat to a man she'd known for 2 days, in front of a minister who'd performed the ceremony for alcohol. This was her life now. "I'll get the horses," Ronan said, already moving toward the door. "Can we come?" Noah asked. "No." "But you're staying with Lucas, both of you in bed by 8, understood?" Lucas nodded, but Noah looked close to tears. "I want to see the wedding." Ronan's expression softened slightly. He crouched down to Noah's level. "It's not going to be like weddings in stories, son. No flowers or music or celebration, just paperwork and promises. You'd be bored." "I don't care. I want to be there when you marry Elena." For a moment, Elena thought Ronan would refuse again. Then he sighed, the sound carrying a weight of resignation and something else, maybe tenderness, buried deep. "Fine. Both of you get your coats, but if you complain once about being cold or tired, you're riding straight back. Clear?" "Clear!" Noah was already running for his coat. Lucas followed more slowly, his expression unreadable. As he passed Elena, he muttered, "This is the strangest wedding in the history of weddings." "Probably," Elena agreed. 20 minutes later, they were riding south through a landscape painted in shades of silver and shadow. Ronan led on a large bay gelding, with Noah perched in front of him, wrapped in blankets. Lucas rode his own smaller horse with surprising skill, and Elena found herself on a mare named Sweet Pea, who seemed content to follow the others without much guidance, which was good, since Elena's riding experience consisted of exactly 3 lessons when she was 12. The sky overhead was impossibly vast, scattered with stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. The moon hung low and full, turning the snow-covered earth into something almost magical. If the circumstances had been different, if this were a real wedding, born from love instead of desperation, it might have been beautiful. Instead, it just felt surreal. They rode in silence for the better part of an hour before Noah spoke up. "Elena?" "Yes?" "Are you scared?" The question caught her off guard. "Of what?" "Marrying Papa, starting a new life, everything." Elena considered lying, offering some platitude about courage or certainty, but she'd promised these boys honesty. "Yes," she said, "I'm terrified." "But you're doing it anyway." Sometimes the terrifying choice is still the right one. Noah seemed to accept this. They rode a bit further before he spoke again. "I'm glad you're not leaving." "Me too," Elena said, and realized she meant it. The minister's house appeared as a small light in the vast darkness, a cabin even more remote than Ronan's ranch. Reverend Pike turned out to be a man in his 60s with a wild beard and wilder eyes, who took one look at their group and laughed. "Ronan Hale as I live and breathe. Didn't think I'd see you darken my door again after—" He stopped, eyes flicking to the boys. "Well, after." "And who's this you've brought me?" "Someone who needs marrying," Ronan said flatly. "Can you do it or not?" "Can I— Have you met me? I married Tom Wheeler to a sack of flour once on a bet. Of course I can marry you." Pike squinted at Elena. "You sure about this, miss? Man's not exactly known for his warmth." "I'm sure," Elena said. "Your funeral. Come on in then. Let's make it legal." The ceremony was everything Ronan had promised, brief, perfunctory, stripped of all romance or ritual. Pike read from a book with water-stained pages, stumbling over words, and occasionally stopping to argue with himself about proper phrasing. Ronan's responses were mechanical, his voice flat as winter ground. Elena's were clearer but no more emotional. "Do you, Ronan Hale, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, for better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do you part?" "I do." "And do you, Elena Cross, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, for better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do you part." Elena looked at Ronan. His eyes met hers, cold, guarded, and absolutely certain this was a mistake. Behind him, Lucas watched with barely concealed resentment, and beside Lucas, Noah beamed like this was the happiest day of his young life. "I do," Elena said. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana and the general understanding that someone's got to keep this wilderness civilized, I pronounce you husband and wife. Kiss her if you want, shake hands if you don't, but make it quick because my dinner's getting cold." Ronan didn't move. Neither did Elena. They stood facing each other in awkward silence until Pike cleared his throat meaningfully. "Right," Ronan said. He extended his hand. Elena shook it. And just like that, she was married. The ride back passed in a blur. Elena's mind couldn't quite grasp what had just happened. One minute she'd been a disgraced teacher walking towards certain death. Now she was a wife, a stepmother, a woman with a home and a name and a future that stretched beyond the next frozen mile. Mrs. Elena Hale. The name felt foreign, like a coat that didn't quite fit. They reached the ranch close to midnight. Ronan helped Noah down, the boy barely conscious and already drifting toward sleep. Lucas dismounted on his own, shot Elena one last evaluating look, and headed inside without a word. Elena started to follow, but Ronan's voice stopped her. "One thing before we go in." She turned. He stood holding the horse's reins, his face shadowed in the moonlight. "This doesn't change anything," he said. "You have a room, a place at the table, and my name. But that's all. Don't expect more. Don't ask for more. And don't try to change what this house is. Understood?" The words should have stung. Instead, Elena felt only a weary kind of relief. At least the boundaries were clear. "Understood," she said. "Good." He turned toward the barn to stable the horses, then paused. "Your room is at the end of the hall, second floor. Used to be for storage, but it's clean. There's a lock on the door. Use it if you want privacy." It was the kindest thing he'd said to her all day, this acknowledgement that she might need safety, space, control over her own small corner of the world. "Thank you," Elena said. Ronan didn't respond. He just led the horses away into darkness, leaving his new wife standing alone in the snow. Elena went inside, climbed the stairs, and found her room. It was small, sparse, and blessedly empty of ghosts. She closed the door, turned the lock, and finally allowed herself to cry. Not from sadness or fear or regret, but from sheer overwhelming relief that she was alive, that she had survived, that tomorrow she would wake up somewhere that wasn't the cold ground or a stranger's charity. She cried herself to sleep in a narrow bed, in a house full of people who didn't want her, legally bound to a man who could barely stand to look at her. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like winning. The first week of Elena's marriage felt like living in a house made of glass. One wrong move and everything would shatter. She woke before dawn that first morning, disoriented by unfamiliar shadows and the absence of wind howling through cracks. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was, why she was here, what she'd done. Then she saw the plain gold band on her finger. Ronan had produced it from somewhere during the ceremony, sliding it onto her hand with all the emotion of someone hammering a nail, and reality settled over her like snow. She was married to a stranger, in a house where she didn't belong. Elena forced herself out of bed and dressed quickly, her breath misting in the cold air. The room had no stove, no fireplace, just four walls and a window overlooking the eastern fields. Storage, Ronan had said, a place to put things you didn't quite want but couldn't throw away. The parallel wasn't lost on her. Downstairs, she found the kitchen already occupied. Ronan stood at the stove, cooking eggs with the same mechanical efficiency he brought to everything else. He glanced up when she entered, his expression unreadable. "You're awake." "Yes?" "Coffee's ready. Cups are in the cabinet left of the sink." He returned his attention to the eggs. "Boys will be down in 10 minutes. They eat at 6 sharp." Elena poured coffee, adding nothing because there was nothing to add. No sugar, no cream, just black liquid that tasted like charred earth. She drank it anyway, grateful for the warmth. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Ronan flipped the eggs with a practiced wrist motion. "Do?" "You married me to help, so what do you need help with?" He was silent for a long moment, spatula frozen midair. Then, "Can you make bread?" "Yes." "Good. We're out. Start a batch after breakfast. There's flour in the pantry, starter in the crock by the window. Make enough for the week." "Anything else?" "Mending. There's a basket in the hall closet, probably 3 months' worth. Boys grow faster than I can keep up with their clothes." He slid eggs onto plates with sharp, efficient movements. "And the chickens need feeding twice daily, morning and evening. Don't overfeed. They'll get fat and stop laying." Elena nodded, committing it all to memory. "I can handle that." "We'll see." It wasn't quite an insult, but it wasn't a vote of confidence either. Elena swallowed her response and took her coffee to the table, sitting in what she hoped wasn't someone's established seat. The silence stretched uncomfortable and thick until footsteps thundered on the stairs. Noah burst into the kitchen, still in his nightshirt, his hair standing in wild directions. "Morning, Papa. Morning, Elena." "Morning," Elena said, surprised by the warmth in the greeting. Lucas followed more slowly, already dressed, his expression carefully neutral. "Papa." "Boys." Ronan set plates in front of each of them. "Eat. We've got fence repairs in the north pasture today. Lucas, you're coming with me. Noah, you stay close to the house." "But Papa, no arguments. You were sick 3 days ago. You're not ready for a full day's work." Noah's face fell, but he knew better than to push. He picked up his fork and began eating with exaggerated sadness, hoping someone would notice his suffering. Elena noticed. "I could use help with the bread," she offered. "If you're staying close anyway." The boy's head snapped up. "Really?" "Really. I've never made bread in this kitchen before. I'll probably need someone to show me where things are kept." It was a transparent excuse. The kitchen was small enough that finding things wouldn't take more than 5 minutes, but Noah latched onto it like a lifeline. "I can do that. I know where everything is. Mama used to let me help with—" He stopped abruptly, eyes darting to his father. Ronan's expression had gone carefully blank. "Fine, but you do what Elena says." "What?" "No running around, no getting underfoot." "I won't, I promise." The meal continued in relative peace. Lucas ate quickly and excused himself to do morning chores. Ronan finished his coffee in 3 long swallows and stood, reaching for his coat. "I'll be back around noon," he said to no one in particular. "If there's trouble—" "I can handle it," Elena interrupted. Ronan's eyes met hers, sharp and assessing. "Can you?" "I survived 3 days in a blizzard. I think I can manage a house and a 7-year-old. Something flickered across his face, maybe respect, maybe irritation at her presumption. "The rifle's above the mantel, loaded. You know how to shoot?" "No." "Then don't touch it unless you have to. And if you have to, point it at whatever's threatening you and pull the trigger. It kicks like a mule, so brace yourself." "That's your firearms instruction?" "That's my don't get yourself killed instruction. Pay attention to it." He left without another word, the door closing behind him with a finality that made Elena feel suddenly, acutely alone. She looked down at Noah, who was watching her with curious eyes. "Papa's not usually this grumpy in the mornings," the boy offered. "No?" "No. Usually he's grumpy all day." Noah grinned, pleased with his own joke. Elena couldn't help but smile. "Good to know. Come on then, show me where your mother kept the bread pans." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Noah's smile faltered, and Elena cursed herself internally. Too soon. Too familiar. Too much. But Noah recovered quickly. "They're in the bottom cabinet. The big ones, not the little ones. Mama said the big ones make better loaves because the dough has room to rise properly." He led her through the kitchen, opening cabinets and drawers, narrating where everything lived and why. His mother had organized it all, he explained. She'd had a system, everything in its place, nothing wasted, the whole kitchen running like clockwork. "Do you remember her well?" Elena asked carefully, measuring flour into a bowl. "Some things. I remember her singing, and I remember she smelled like lavender. She had a plant in the window, see?" He pointed to an empty sill. "It died after she did. Papa said he tried to keep it alive, but he doesn't have the touch for growing things." "What else do you remember?" Noah scrunched his face, thinking hard. "She used to read to us at night. Stories about knights and dragons and princesses who saved themselves. Lucas said those weren't proper stories, but Mama said any story where women had brains was proper enough for her house. His smile turned wistful. I like those stories. Me too, Elena said. I used to teach stories like that to my students. Really? What happened to them? Your students, I mean. I had to leave, but I hope they're still reading, still learning, still asking questions, even when the adults don't like the answers. Noah considered this with the gravity of someone far older than his years. Is that why you got in trouble? For teaching them to ask questions? Something like that. That's stupid. Questions are how you learn things. You'd think so, but some people prefer comfortable ignorance to uncomfortable truth. What's ignorance? Not knowing things, sometimes on purpose. Noah wrinkled his nose. That sounds awful. Why would anyone want to not know things on purpose? Because knowing things means having to do something about them, and doing something is harder than doing nothing. The boy absorbed this while Elena kneaded dough, her hands working the sticky mass into something smooth and elastic. The repetitive motion was soothing, meditative. For a few minutes, she could almost forget the strangeness of her situation and just exist in the simple pleasure of creation. Elena? Yes? Are you going to leave? The question hit like a bucket of cold water. Elena stopped kneading, her hands still buried in dough. What makes you ask that? Lucas says all women leave eventually. Mama left because she got sick. And he says you'll leave because Papa's too hard to live with and we're too much trouble. Lucas said that? Not to you, to me. Last night after we went to bed. He said I shouldn't get attached because you're just passing through. Elena pulled her hands free and wiped them on a towel, then crouched down to Noah's eye level. Look at me. He did, his brown eyes wide and worried. I made a promise to your father, Elena said, and I made a promise to you and Lucas. I said I'd stay as long as I'm wanted, and I meant it. Your brother is scared. That's normal. That's okay. But he's wrong about me. I'm not passing through. I'm here. But what if Papa decides he doesn't want you anymore? Then he'll tell me, and we'll figure it out together. But until that happens, I'm not going anywhere. Understood? Noah nodded slowly. You promise? I promise. Okay. He seemed satisfied, or at least willing to trust for now. Can I punch the dough? Mama used to let me punch it down when it got puffy. Once it rises, you can punch it all you want. They spent the rest of the morning in comfortable companionship. Noah chattered about the ranch, the animals, his friend from a neighboring property 3 miles away, who he only saw twice a year. Elena listened and worked, making bread, starting soup for lunch, tackling the mountain of mending that had accumulated in the hall closet. The clothes told stories, small tears from barbed wire, missing buttons, hems let down as boys grew. One of Ronan's shirts had a sleeve nearly ripped off. Some accident involving a spooked horse, Noah explained. His mother had meant to fix it but got sick before she could. Ronan had worn it anyway, torn sleeve and all, until it became too damaged to salvage. Elena repaired it now, her needle moving in small, precise stitches. It felt like an intrusion, touching these intimate objects, but it was also what she'd been brought here to do. Help. Fill gaps. Keep the household running. Around 11:30, Lucas returned from morning chores, his clothes dusted with hay and his expression carefully blank. He glanced at Elena, at the mending in her lap, at Noah sitting contentedly on the floor playing with wooden horses. Smells like bread, he said. Second batch is rising, Elena confirmed. Mama's recipe? I don't know. Noah showed me where things were kept. I used what was here. Lucas moved to the window, looking out toward the north pasture where Ronan was working. He'll want lunch soon. He gets mean when he's hungry. Then it's lucky I made soup. Is it good? You'll have to tell me. I'm new to this kitchen. Lucas turned back to her, his expression calculating. You're trying really hard. I am. Why? Because I said I would, and because trying is better than the alternative, which is failing. He seemed to accept this logic. Without another word, he disappeared upstairs, returning 10 minutes later in cleaner clothes, just as Ronan came through the door, stamping snow from his boots. Smells like food, Ronan observed, his tone neutral. Soup and fresh bread, Elena said. Give me 5 minutes to set the table. I can do it myself. I know you can, but you don't have to. They locked eyes for a moment, some silent battle of wills playing out in the space between them. Then Ronan grunted and moved to wash his hands at the basin, conceding the point without actually agreeing. Lunch was quieter than breakfast. The men, because that's what Lucas was trying to be, a small man in training, ate with single-minded focus. Noah provided occasional commentary about his morning, about the bread making, about absolutely nothing of consequence. And Elena ate sparingly, hyper-aware of being watched, evaluated, judged on every small action. When the meal ended, Ronan pushed back from the table. Good soup. It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd received. Elena accepted it with a small nod. Lucas and I will be in the south barn this afternoon, Ronan continued. Roof needs patching before the next storm. Noah, you stay with Elena. Yes, Papa. After they left, the house fell into afternoon stillness. Elena washed dishes while Noah played quietly, and for just a moment she allowed herself to feel something almost like peace. This could work. This strange arrangement, this marriage of convenience, this family held together by practicality rather than love, it could work. The illusion lasted exactly 3 days. On the fourth morning, Elena woke to voices arguing downstairs. She dressed quickly and descended to find Lucas and Ronan locked in a battle of wills across the kitchen table. I don't need a tutor, Lucas was saying, his voice rising. I can read fine. I know numbers fine. I don't need some woman teaching me things I already know. You haven't had proper schooling in 2 years, Ronan countered. You're falling behind. Behind who? There's no one out here to compete with. What difference does it make if I know history or poetry or any of that useless? It makes a difference to me. Ronan's voice dropped to something dangerous. Your mother would have wanted you educated, both of you, and we have a school teacher living under this roof now. You're using her. I didn't ask for a school teacher. You didn't ask for a lot of things, son, but that doesn't change what is. Lucas's face flushed red. You can't make me. I absolutely can, and I am. You and Noah will spend 2 hours every afternoon with Elena, learning whatever she deems appropriate. That's not a request. This is because of her. Lucas spun to face Elena, who'd been trying to make herself invisible in the doorway. You told him to do this. I didn't, Elena said calmly, but if he's asking me to teach, I will. I don't want to learn from you. That's unfortunate, because I'm the only teacher available. You're not a teacher. You got fired. You're just some woman who tricked her way into our house. Lucas, Ronan's voice cracked like a whip. Apologize. Now. I won't. She's not my mother. She's not my teacher. She's not anything except a stranger we're stuck with. Lucas's voice broke on the last word. And I hate that we're pretending this is normal. I hate that Noah acts like she's been here forever. I hate that you brought her here and expect us to just accept it. Silence crashed down like a fallen tree. Elena watched the boy's chest heave, watched tears threatening at the corners of his eyes that he was fighting desperately not to shed. He was breaking, had been breaking for months, maybe years, and this was the fracture finally showing. Ronan stood slowly. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than Elena had ever heard it. Go to your room. Papa, go to your room. We'll discuss this when you've calmed down. Lucas fled, his footsteps pounding up the stairs. A door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Then silence again, heavier now, weighted with all the things none of them knew how to say. Ronan sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 40-odd years and then some. He dragged a hand across his face. I'm sorry, he said. Elena moved into the room properly. For what? For that. For him. For asking you to deal with this mess. He's grieving. He's allowed to be angry. He's being cruel. He's being 11. There's a difference. Elena poured coffee and set a cup in front of Ronan without asking if he wanted it. You can't force this, the teaching, I mean. If Lucas isn't ready, he needs education. Both of them do. And they'll get it, but not by making it a punishment. She sat across from him. Let me handle this my way. Ronan's eyes narrowed. Which is? Let me talk to him. Alone. No punishments, no demands, just conversation. He'll tell you to leave. Probably. But I've dealt with hostile students before. I know how to navigate resistance. This isn't a classroom, Elena. No, it's harder. But the principle's the same. You can't force learning on someone who's closed themselves off. You have to find the door they left unlocked and slip in quietly. Ronan stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood, grabbed his coat. Fine. Try it your way. But if he's still refusing by week's end, we do it mine. Deal. He left without another word. Through the window, Elena watched him cross to the barn, his shoulders rigid with frustration. Then she looked at the ceiling, toward where Lucas was presumably destroying his room or crying or both. She gave him an hour. When she finally climbed the stairs and knocked on his door, there was no answer. She knocked again. Go away. I'm coming in, Elena said. I said go away. She opened the door anyway. Lucas sat on his bed, knees pulled to his chest, eyes red but dry. His room was neat, painfully so. Everything in perfect order except for a pillow that looked like it had been punched repeatedly. I told you to leave, he said. Elena closed the door and leaned against it. I don't take orders from people who aren't paying me. And since your father hired me, not you, I answer to him. Then he should have told you to leave me alone. He suggested it. I declined. Lucas glared at her with impressive intensity for someone so young. What do you want? To understand. Understand what? Why you're so angry at me specifically. I get that you're angry in general. You lost your mother. Your life got turned upside down. Now there's a stranger in her place. That's legitimate. But there's something else, something more than just grief. What is it? I already told you. You're trying to replace her. No, that's the easy answer, the safe one. But I think there's something deeper. Elena moved slowly into the room, settling into the chair at Lucas's small desk. I think you're angry because I represent change. And change means accepting that your mother really is gone. That life is moving forward whether you're ready or not. Lucas's jaw clenched. You don't know anything. Then educate me. Explain it. Make me understand what I'm missing. Why should I? Because carrying all that anger alone is exhausting. And because maybe, just maybe, if you actually tell me what's wrong, I can help fix it. You can't fix anything. Maybe not, but I can try. Elena kept her voice gentle, non-confrontational. Talk to me, Lucas. Not as your father's wife, not as a teacher, just as another person who's lost things she can't get back. The boy's face worked through several emotions before settling on something raw and honest. She was the good one. What? Mama, she was the good one. Papa's practical and strong and he keeps everything running, but Mama was the one who made it worth running. She was the one who made us feel, he struggled for words, like we mattered, like we weren't just chores to manage or mouths to feed, but actual people she loved. Tears finally spilled over. And then she died, and Papa shut down. He keeps us fed and safe, but he doesn't see us anymore. Not really. We're just items on a list to check off. Wake up, feed the boys, send them to work, make sure they don't die. That's it. That's all we are now. Elena's heart twisted. Lucas, and now you're here, and everyone's acting like that fixes things, like having a woman in the house automatically makes it okay again. But it doesn't, because you're not her. You're just someone pretending, and eventually you'll figure out that we're too broken to fix and you'll leave too, and then what? Then we'll have lost Mama and gotten used to you and lost you, and it'll be even worse than before. The truth of it hung in the air between them, raw and bleeding. Elena took a careful breath. You're right. Lucas blinked, clearly expecting argument. What? You're right. I'm not your mother. I'll never be your mother. And yes, I might leave someday. That's possible. Life is uncertain, and I can't promise I'll be here forever any more than your mother could promise that. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. But here's what I can promise. While I'm here, I see you, both of you. Noah with his endless questions and his need to be helpful, and you carrying weight that no kid should have to carry, trying to be strong enough for everyone. I see it, and I'm not trying to replace your mother or fix your grief or make everything magically better. I'm just trying to help with the day-to-day stuff so your father doesn't work himself to death and you don't have to grow up quite so fast. Lucas wiped his eyes roughly. Then why the teaching? Why force that on us? I'm not forcing anything. Your father asked because he's worried you're falling behind. But if you're not ready, you're not ready. I won't drag you into lessons kicking and screaming. She paused. But I will make you an offer. What kind of offer? Every afternoon, I'm going to be in the kitchen or the front room with books and paper. I'll be working on my own studies. There's a lot I still want to learn. If you want to join me, ask questions, read together, you're welcome. If you don't, fine. No pressure, no demands, just an open door. That's it? That's it. What about Papa? He said we have to study with you. I'll handle your father. You just decide what you want to do, independent of what he wants or what I want. Your education, your choice. Lucas studied her with those two old eyes. You're weird. I've been called worse. A ghost of a smile flickered across his face and died. I still don't trust you. Fair enough. Trust is earned, not given. I can live with that. And I'm still not calling you Mama. I'd be concerned if you did. The tension in the room eased slightly, not gone but no longer suffocating. Lucas uncurled from his defensive position, legs dropping over the edge of the bed. What would we study? He asked. If I did join you, which I'm not saying I will. What do you want to learn? I don't know. Real things, I guess. Not poetry or dead languages or stupid stuff that doesn't matter out here. Like what? Give me examples of real things. Lucas thought for a moment. How to calculate distances without measuring. How weather works. Why some years the crops do better than others. How to keep the ranch running when I'm older and Papa's... He stopped, not finishing the sentence. When he's older and needs you to take over, Elena finished gently. Those are good topics. Practical. We can study those. Really? Really. Mathematics, meteorology, agriculture, business management, all useful, all applicable to your life here. We'll make it relevant. What about Noah? He's not interested in ranch stuff. He wants to be a veterinarian or something equally impossible. Then we'll teach him biology, anatomy, animal husbandry, whatever feeds his interests. Elena stood. The point isn't to force-feed you information you'll never use. The point is to help you become whoever you're trying to become. That's what good teaching is. Lucas absorbed this, his expression shifting from suspicion to something that might have been tentative interest. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Elena moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Lucas, your father does see you. He's just not good at showing it. But the fact that he wants you educated, even though he's barely holding things together, that's love. Clumsy, inarticulate love, but love nonetheless. How do you know? Because I've seen men who don't love their children. They don't care if the kids can read. They don't worry about them falling behind. They just see extra hands for labor and let it go at that. Your father's not that. He's trying. He's just bad at it. She left before Lucas could respond, closing the door quietly behind her. Downstairs, she found Noah in the kitchen, unusually subdued. Is Lucas okay? He will be, Elena said. He yells a lot now. He didn't used to. People yell when they don't know how else to let the feelings out. Do you yell? Elena considered the question. Sometimes, but I try to use words first. Yelling should be a last resort, not a first response. Noah nodded seriously. Will you teach me things? Even if Lucas doesn't want to? Of course. Good, because I have a lot of questions, and Papa gets frustrated when I ask too many. Then you and I are going to get along very well, because I believe there's no such thing as too many questions. The boy beamed at her, and Elena felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Not quite belonging, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. That evening, Ronan returned to find the house running smoothly. Dinner cooked, bread baked, Lucas and Elena in a state of détente, if not actual peace. He looked between them, questions clearly forming, but Elena shook her head minutely. Later. After the boys were in bed, Ronan found her in the front room, mending by lamplight. He stood in the doorway, awkward and huge, clearly uncomfortable with what he needed to say. Did you talk to him? He asked finally. Yes. And? and he'll come around. On his own terms, in his own time. But he'll come around. Ronan was silent for a long moment. What did you say to him? I listened, mostly, and I made him an offer he could accept without losing face. Which was? Elena set down her mending and met his eyes. I made learning optional. He can join me in the afternoons if he wants, but I won't force it. And when he does join, notice I said when, not if, we'll focus on things that actually matter to him. That's not how education works. That's exactly how education works if you want it to stick. Forcing information on resistant students just makes them hate learning. Making it relevant, making it their choice, makes them hungry for more. Ronan absorbed this, his expression unreadable. You're confident. I'm experienced. There's a difference. And if you're wrong, if he never chooses to join you, then I'll have failed. But I'd rather fail trying something new than succeed at making your son miserable. Another long silence. Then Ronan said, his mother used to say something similar, about teaching, about making things relevant. She homeschooled them before she got sick, did it her own way, ignored all the conventional advice, and they learned more from her than they ever would have from rote memorization and rigid schedules. It was the most he'd spoken about his late wife since Elena arrived. She held very still, afraid of breaking the moment. She sounds like she was a good teacher, Elena said carefully. She was a good everything. Ronan's voice went rough. And I'm asking you to fill shoes you can't possibly fill, with boys who resent you for trying, in a situation that would break most people. It's not fair. Life rarely is. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it honest. Elena picked up her mending again, giving him the option to leave or stay as he chose. I'm not trying to be her, Ronan. I'm just trying to be useful. That's all. He stood there a moment longer, something working behind his eyes. Then he nodded once and left, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Elena finished her mending alone, listening to the house settle around her. Somewhere above, Lucas probably lay awake, wrestling with decisions about trust and education, and whether to give this strange new woman a chance. Noah slept soundly, already halfway to accepting her as part of his world. And Ronan stood at his window. She'd seen the light in his room when she'd glanced up earlier, keeping watch over land and family like a sentinel who could never rest. They were all broken in their own ways, all carrying grief and loss and the weight of survival in an unforgiving place. But they were surviving, together. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The next afternoon, Elena set herself up in the front room as promised. She had books borrowed from the limited selection in Ronan's office, paper she'd found in a drawer, pencils worn down to stubs. She began working through a mathematics problem, genuinely absorbed in the work, when footsteps approached. Lucas stood in the doorway, defiant and uncertain in equal measure. I'm not saying I want to learn anything, he announced. Okay, Elena said, not looking up. I'm just bored, and Noah's napping, so I figured I'd see what you're doing. I'm working on calculating the optimal angle for water flow in irrigation systems. Completely impractical and useless, of course. She said it with a straight face. Lucas caught the sarcasm, and his mouth twitched. That actually sounds kind of useful. Extremely, especially for a ranch that needs to maximize water efficiency. Elena finally looked up. Want to help me figure it out? Lucas hesitated on the threshold of commitment. Then he stepped into the room and sat down across from her. Show me what you've got so far. Elena smiled and began explaining. And just like that, without fanfare or formal agreements, Lucas's education resumed. By week's end, both boys were joining her every afternoon. Noah brought his endless questions about animals and weather and why the sky changed colors. Lucas brought his practical mind and growing fascination with mathematics. And Elena brought patience, creativity, and the kind of teaching that made learning feel like discovery instead of obligation. Ronan watched from a distance, never commenting, never interfering. But Elena caught him sometimes, standing in doorways or pausing in his work, listening to his sons laugh over a shared joke or argue enthusiastically about competing theories. His expression in those moments was complicated: grief for what they'd lost, gratitude for what they were finding, and something else she couldn't quite name. The house began to change. Small things at first. Elena found curtains in a trunk and hung them, softening the harsh light. She organized the pantry, planted herbs in pots on the windowsill, repaired the broken cabinet latch that had been annoying everyone for months. The boys started setting the table without being asked. Lucas stopped slamming doors. Noah's nightmares, which Elena learned about from hearing him cry out one night, became less frequent. It wasn't transformation, it wasn't healing, but it was something. Movement. Progress. The slow, painful work of becoming a family instead of just people occupying the same space. And through it all, Elena and Ronan maintained their careful distance. They worked together but lived separately. They spoke civilly but without intimacy. They shared a name and a household but nothing deeper. It was exactly what they'd agreed to. A practical arrangement, nothing more. Elena told herself that was fine, told herself she didn't notice the way Ronan's rare smiles transformed his harsh face, told herself she didn't care that he still flinched away from any accidental touch, like contact might burn him, told herself the loneliness of her small room was a fair price for safety and purpose. She told herself a lot of things. And then, 3 weeks into her marriage, everything changed. The riders came at dusk on a Thursday, when the winter light was failing and shadows stretched long across the snow. Elena was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard the dogs start barking, not their usual alert at wildlife or the wind, but something sharper, more aggressive. She moved to the window and felt her stomach drop. 5 men on horseback were approaching the gate. Even from a distance, she could tell something was wrong. They rode with the kind of casual menace that spoke of men used to taking what they wanted, their horses lean and hard-ridden, their clothes rough even by frontier standards. Ronan was in the south barn with Lucas, too far to reach quickly. Noah sat at the kitchen table working on his letters, oblivious to the danger approaching. Elena's mind raced through options. Lock the doors and hope they passed by? Go out and confront them? Get the rifle Ronan had mentioned her first day here, the one she didn't know how to use? The decision was made for her when the lead rider dismounted and pushed through the gate without waiting for permission. The others followed, spreading out across the yard with practiced efficiency. Men who'd done this before, who knew how to intimidate and control. "Stay here," Elena told Noah, trying to keep her voice calm. "Don't come outside no matter what you hear. Understand?" The boy's eyes went wide. "What's happening?" "Nothing yet, but I need you to promise me you'll stay inside." "I promise." Elena grabbed her coat and stepped onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind her. The cold hit like a fist, but she barely felt it. All her attention was fixed on the men now standing in her yard, looking at her house like wolves eyeing a hen house. The leader was a man in his 40s with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw and teeth stained dark from tobacco. He smiled when he saw Elena, and it was the worst kind of smile, the kind that said he'd found something interesting to play with. "Well now," he said, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "Didn't expect to find a woman here. Ronan Hale's place, isn't it?" Elena stayed on the porch, keeping the high ground. "It is, and you're trespassing. State your business or leave." The man's smile widened. "Got some spine on you, I like that." He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the snow. "Name's Cutter. Maybe Ronan mentioned me?" He hadn't, but Elena kept her face neutral. "Mr. Hale isn't here. You can come back another time." "Oh, I don't think so. See, we've ridden 2 days to have a conversation with Ronan, and we're not leaving without having it." Cutter took a step closer. "So why don't you invite us in for some coffee while we wait? You look like the hospitable type." "No? No?" He said it like the word amused him. "You sure about that, sweetheart? 5 of us, 1 of you. Those aren't great odds for being unfriendly." Elena's hand found the porch railing, gripping it to keep from shaking. Every instinct screamed at her to run inside, bar the door, hide until Ronan came back. But she'd learned years ago that running from predators just made them give chase. "I said no. This is private property. You're not welcome here. Leave now before my husband returns and makes you leave." One of the other men laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Your husband? You mean you actually married that cold bastard? What'd he do? Buy you?" The words hit closer to truth than comfortable, but Elena didn't flinch. "My marriage is none of your concern. Now leave." Cutter held up his hands in mock surrender. "Easy now. We're just looking for a civil conversation. See, Ronan borrowed some money from our employer a while back. Payment was due last month, then the month before. We're just here to collect what's owed. I don't know anything about that. Don't you? That's interesting. Most wives know about their husband's debts. He tilted his head, studying her. Unless you're not really his wife, just some woman keeping his bed warm in exchange for room and board. Get off my property. Your property. That's rich. Woman, you don't own anything. The land's Ronan's, the house is Ronan's, even that dress you're wearing probably belonged to his first wife. Cutter's voice dropped to something uglier. Only thing you own is whatever he lets you keep, and since he's not here to speak for you, the threat hung in the air like smoke. Then a voice cut across the yard, cold and sharp as breaking ice. Touch her, and you're a dead man. Ronan stood at the corner of the barn, rifle leveled at Cutter's chest. Lucas was visible behind him, holding another rifle with surprising steadiness for someone his size. They must have seen the riders from the barn and circled around for a better position. Relief flooded through Elena so powerfully she nearly stumbled. Cutter's smile didn't waver, but his hand moved carefully away from his gun. Ronan, good to see you too. Was just making conversation with your lovely wife here. Conversation's over. State your business or ride out. You know why we're here. The money, Ronan. 3 months overdue. Mr. Pike is losing patience. Pike can wait another month. I'll have it then. That's what you said last month, and the month before that. Cutter's voice hardened. He's done waiting. You pay now, or we start taking collateral. I don't have it now. The winter's been hard. I lost cattle in the storms, had to replace equipment. I'll have the money come spring when I can sell stock. Spring's 2 months away. Pike wants payment this week. Then Pike's going to be disappointed. The standoff stretched taut. Elena could see Ronan's finger resting on the trigger, could see the way Cutter's men were shifting, hands drifting toward their own weapons. This could turn bloody in a heartbeat. How much does he owe? Elena heard herself ask. Every head turned toward her. Ronan's eyes went wide with something between shock and fury. Elena, get inside. How much? She repeated, ignoring him. Cutter's grin returned. $800. Plus interest. 800. It might as well have been 8 million for what Elena had access to, but she pressed on anyway. And if we paid half now, would Pike accept the rest in spring? Elena, would he? She demanded. Cutter considered. Maybe. If it was enough to show good faith, 400 now might buy you until April. We don't have 400, Ronan said flatly. But Elena's mind was racing. The ranch did have assets, livestock, equipment, reserves. Things Ronan couldn't easily liquidate without weakening the operation. Things he'd rather die than sacrifice. But there were other options. Less practical ones. Desperate ones. Give me 3 days, Elena said. I can get $400 in 3 days. Now Ronan did lower the rifle, staring at her like she'd lost her mind. What are you talking about? Trust me, 3 days, and I'll have the money. Woman, you've been here less than a month. You don't have $2 to your name, let alone 400. I said trust me. Cutter watched this exchange with obvious entertainment. Well now, this is interesting. The wife's got more fight than the husband. How about it, Ronan? You want to take her deal? No? Yes, Elena countered. 3 days. You come back Saturday evening, I'll have $400. Take it or leave it. Cutter looked between them, clearly enjoying Ronan's discomfort. Saturday evening it is. But if you don't have the money, we start taking collateral, livestock, equipment, whatever we can haul. And if that's not enough, his eyes traveled over Elena in a way that made her skin crawl. We'll figure something out. You'll have your money, Elena said, voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. We better. Cutter mounted his horse, his men following suit. Saturday. Don't disappoint me, Mrs. Hale. I'd hate for things to get unpleasant. They rode out as casually as they'd arrived, leaving destruction in their wake that was all psychological. The moment they cleared the gate, Ronan rounded on Elena. What the hell was that? That was me buying us time. Time for what? You don't have $400? You don't have any money. Not yet, but I will. Elena moved past him toward the house, her legs suddenly shaking with delayed reaction. I need to go to town tomorrow. Town? For what? That's my business. Ronan grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her. Like hell it is. You just promised $800 to a man who'll kill us all if you can't deliver. That makes it very much my business. Elena yanked her arm free, surprising them both with the force of it. You want to know what I'm going to do? Fine. I'm going to sell the only things of value I own. My mother's jewelry. It's not much. A necklace, a ring, a brooch. But it's real gold and probably worth more out here where gold is scarce than it ever was back east. There's a jeweler in Bozeman. I'll sell it, get the money, and save your ranch from men who clearly don't have any problem burning it to the ground. I don't want your family jewelry. And I don't want to watch men like that come back and destroy everything you've built. So we're both going to have to live with disappointment. She started for the house again, then stopped. And Ronan, next time you owe someone money and dangerous men might come calling, maybe mention it to your wife before she's blindsided on the front porch. She slammed the door before he could respond. Inside, Noah was exactly where she'd left him, his face pale. Are they gone? They're gone. Elena pulled him into a hug, feeling him shake against her. You're safe. We're all safe. Who were they? No one you need to worry about. They scared me. They scared me too, but they're gone now. Lucas appeared from wherever he'd been hiding, probably near the door with a kitchen knife, knowing him, and looked at Elena with new eyes. You really have jewelry worth $400? Maybe. I hope so. And you're just going to sell it? For us? For all of us, including me. This is my home too now, remember? The boy absorbed this, his expression complicated. Then he nodded once, sharp and certain. I'm coming with you tomorrow, to town. Lucas, you don't know the territory. You've never been to Bozeman. You need someone who does. His jaw set stubbornly. I'm coming. Elena wanted to argue, but he was right. And more than that, she could see he needed this. Needed to be part of the solution, to contribute instead of just being protected. Fine. We leave at first light. Ronan came in an hour later after he'd cooled down and put away the rifles. Elena was cooking dinner like nothing had happened, like her hands weren't still shaking, like she hadn't just promised money she might not have to men who could destroy them all. He watched her work in silence for a long moment, then, You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. It's not your debt. It became my debt the moment I married you. That's how this works. Elena chopped carrots with more force than necessary. You gave me a name and a home. In exchange, I help carry the weight. This is weight. I'm carrying it. By selling your mother's jewelry, it's just metal and stones. She's been dead 8 years. I think she'd understand choosing survival over sentiment. Ronan leaned against the counter, and Elena could feel his eyes on her. Why? He asked quietly. Why what? Why do this? You could walk away. You could tell those men where to find me and disappear while they're busy collecting their debt. You'd be free of this mess, this marriage, this whole impossible situation. Elena set down the knife and turned to face him fully. Is that what you think of me? That I'd abandon people who needed help just because things got difficult? I think most people would. Then most people are cowards. She picked up the knife again, returned to cutting. I said vows, Ronan. They might not have been romantic or traditional, and you might think they don't mean anything because we don't love each other, but they mean something to me. I said I'd stay. I'm staying, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The silence that followed was different than their usual careful distance. Something had shifted. Some wall had developed a crack. The jewelry might not be enough, Ronan said finally. Then I'll find another way. Elena, I said I'll find another way. Drop it. He did, but not before she caught something in his expression. Gratitude, maybe, or the beginning of respect. Possibly both. Dinner was quieter than usual. The boys picked up on the tension and ate without their normal chatter. Afterwards, Ronan disappeared to check the perimeter, making sure Cutter's men had really left, Elena assumed, while she cleaned up and tried not to think about all the ways her plan could fail. She was scrubbing the last pot when Lucas appeared at her elbow. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Elena paused. For what? For how I've been. For fighting you. For making things harder. You're trying to help, and I've been... He struggled for words. A pain in the ass. Papa would wash my mouth out for saying that, but it's true. You are protecting your family. There's no shame in that. But you're family too now, aren't you? The question landed with unexpected weight. Elena set down the pot, dried her hands, crouched to Lucas's eye level. I'm trying to be, she said honestly, but that's not something I can decide alone. It's something we all have to choose, together. And it takes time. How much time? However long it takes. There's no deadline on becoming a family. Lucas nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you're doing a good job. With the teaching and the cooking and standing up to those men today. Mama would have done the same thing. It was the highest compliment he could have given, and they both knew it. Elena felt her throat tighten. Thank you, she managed. Don't die tomorrow. I'll try my best not to. Good. He hesitated, then quickly hugged her, brief and awkward but genuine, before fleeing upstairs like the hounds of hell were after him. Elena stood alone in the kitchen, one hand pressed to her chest where her heart was doing complicated things, and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd taken on. Not just a marriage of convenience, but a family. Real people with real needs and real dangers. People she was responsible for now, whether she'd planned for it or not. The next morning dawned clear and brutally cold. Elena was up before the sun, packing supplies for the journey while Lucas tended the horses. Ronan watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. You sure about this? He asked. No, but I'm doing it anyway. It's a hard ride. 8 hours there, 8 back if you push. That's assuming the weather holds. It'll hold. And if it doesn't? Elena faced him squarely. Then Lucas and I will find shelter and wait it out. We're not stupid, Ronan. Give us some credit. I'm giving you credit. I'm also giving you every worst-case scenario because that's what living out here requires, assuming the worst and planning for it. Then consider it planned for. We have supplies, weapons, and enough sense to turn back if conditions get dangerous. Anything else? Ronan's jaw worked like he wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Finally, he pulled something from his pocket, a small leather pouch that clinked when he pressed it into her hand. $50, he said. From the ranch reserves. It's not much, but combined with whatever you get for the jewelry, it might be enough. Ronan, take it, please. The word sounded rusty, like he didn't use it often. And come back safe, both of you. The concern in his voice was unmistakable. Elena nodded, pocketing the money. We will. Lucas appeared with the horses, and they mounted up. Noah came running out, still in his nightshirt, throwing his arms around his brother's leg. Be careful. I will, Runt. Take care of Papa while we're gone. I will! They rode out into a world painted silver and blue, the sun just beginning to crest the mountains. The journey was long and cold and exactly as hard as Ronan had warned. But Lucas proved to be excellent company, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the territory with the kind of enthusiasm that made the miles pass faster. Around noon, they stopped to rest the horses and eat cold biscuits and jerky. Lucas sat on a fallen log, studying Elena with that assessing gaze he'd inherited from his father. Can I ask you something? He said. Always. Why did you really come here? Not the practical reasons about needing a home. The real reason. Elena considered the question, decided he deserved honesty. I was tired of being afraid, of being small and powerless and at the mercy of people who didn't care if I lived or died. Coming here was terrifying, but it was also a choice, my choice. And I was so sick of other people making choices for me that even a terrible choice felt better than no choice at all. Lucas absorbed this. Are you still afraid? Every day. But it's a different kind of afraid now. Not the paralyzing kind that makes you freeze, the kind that makes you move faster. I think I understand that. Good. Because the world's a scary place, Lucas. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. The trick is learning to be scared and functional at the same time. They rode on, reaching Bozeman as the sun began its descent. The town was bigger than Elena expected, maybe 300 people, with actual storefronts and a hotel, and the kind of civilization that felt foreign after weeks on the ranch. The jeweler was a stern-faced man named Kaufman, who looked at Elena's pieces with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen it all. He examined each item carefully. The necklace her mother had worn on her wedding day, the ring that had belonged to her grandmother, the brooch that was probably the most valuable of the lot. 200 for the lot, he said finally. Elena's heart sank. That's all? Gold's not worth as much as you'd think out here, and the workmanship's Eastern, too delicate for frontier tastes. 200's fair. It wasn't fair, but it was what he was offering. Combined with Ronan's 50, it gave them $250. Not enough. Can you go higher? Elena asked. 250? Kaufman shook his head. 200's my final offer. Elena took a breath, about to accept, when Lucas spoke up. What about my mother's ring? Both adults turned to stare at him. The boy was pulling something from inside his shirt, a chain with a woman's wedding band hanging from it. Lucas, Elena started. It's gold too, real gold, Papa said, and it's just sitting in my drawer doing nothing. Mama's not coming back to wear it. His voice was steady despite the tears in his eyes. Sell it. We need the money more than I need a reminder. I can't let you do that. You're not letting me. I'm choosing, like you said, making my own choice, even if it's scary. He held the ring out to Kaufman. How much? The jeweler examined it, and Elena saw his expression shift to something like respect. This is quality work. I can give you 100 for it. 300 total. Still not enough, but closer. Elena looked at Lucas, saw the determination in his young face, the way he was fighting not to break down over surrendering his last physical connection to his mother. She wanted to refuse, wanted to protect him from this loss, but he'd already lost so much. And he was trying to be part of the solution, trying to carry weight like she did. She couldn't take that from him. We'll take it, Elena said quietly. All of it. 300. Kaufman counted out the money, and Elena pocketed it with hands that wanted to shake. 350 with Ronan's contribution, still 50 short of what Cutter wanted. They left the shop in heavy silence. Lucas walked beside her, his hand occasionally touching his chest where the ring used to hang, his face carefully blank. Lucas, don't. His voice was rough. If you're going to say, I didn't have to do that, don't. I know I didn't have to. I wanted to. Mama would have wanted me to protect the family, and that's what I'm doing, so please don't make it harder by being nice about it. Elena respected that, walked in silence until they reached the horses. Then she said, Your mother would be proud of you. You didn't know her. I didn't have to. Any mother would be proud of a son brave enough to sacrifice something precious to protect the people he loves. Lucas's composure finally cracked. He turned into Elena's coat and cried, hard, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. She held him while he broke, there in the street of a frontier town, letting him grieve for everything he'd lost and everything he was still losing. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were red but clearer. We still need $50, he said. I know. Where are we going to get it? Elena looked around the town, her mind racing through possibilities. Then her eyes landed on the hotel and the sign in the window advertising for temporary help. Wait here, she told Lucas. Inside, she found the hotel manager and made a proposal. She'd work the next day, cooking, cleaning, whatever they needed, in exchange for $50. It was highway robbery in terms of labor value, but the manager took one look at her desperate face and agreed. Elena emerged victorious but exhausted. We're staying here tonight. I work tomorrow. We ride back tomorrow night with the full 400. Papa's going to be worried. Papa's going to have to deal with it. Come on, let's find somewhere cheap to sleep. They spent that night in a boarding house that charged $1 for a room with 2 narrow beds and questionable heating. Lucas fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the journey and the emotion. Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the ways this plan could still fail. But they'd come this far. She'd see it through. The next day passed in a blur of back-breaking work. Elena cooked breakfast for 30 guests, scrubbed floors, changed linens, and did every degrading task the manager could think of with a smile plastered on her face. Lucas helped where he could, running errands and hauling water, the two of them working in tandem like they'd been partners for years instead of weeks. By evening, Elena collected her $50 and they began the long ride home. They arrived after midnight, exhausted and frozen, but triumphant. Ronan met them in the yard, having obviously been watching for them, his relief palpable. "You're back." "We're back." Elena dismounted on shaking legs and pressed the money into his hand. $400. Count it. He did, his expression shifting from disbelief to something she couldn't quite identify. How? Does it matter? Elena, it's done. When Cutter comes tomorrow, you pay him, and then this is over. Ronan looked at the money, then at her, then at Lucas, who was already leading the horses to the barn. What did you sell? Everything that mattered less than this family. The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Then Ronan did something unexpected. He pulled Elena into a brief, awkward hug. "Thank you," he said into her hair. Elena stood frozen, shocked by the contact. Then her arms came up tentatively, returning the embrace. It lasted maybe 3 seconds before they both pulled away, uncomfortable with the intimacy. But something had changed, some barrier had shifted. "Get inside before you freeze," Ronan said roughly. "I'll finish with the horses." Elena went, feeling his eyes on her back the whole way. When Cutter arrived the next evening, it was Ronan who met him at the gate with the money. Elena watched from the window, holding her breath until the exchange was made and the riders left without incident. That night, Ronan called everyone into the front room. He stood before his family, because that's what they'd become, Elena realized, a real family, and cleared his throat awkwardly. "I owe you all an apology," he began. "I should have told you about the debt. Should have warned you men like that might come. I was trying to handle it myself, and that was stupid and dangerous." His eyes found Elena's. "You saved this ranch, you and Lucas. What you did, what you sacrificed, I won't forget it. We're family," Elena said simply. "That's what family does." Ronan nodded, his throat working. Then he did something that shocked them all. He smiled. Not the ghost of a smile, not a brief twitch of the lips, but an actual, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Yeah," he said. "I guess we are." And in that moment, standing in a ranch house on the Montana frontier, surrounded by people who'd started as strangers and become something more, Elena finally felt like she'd come home. Spring came late that year, arriving not as a gentle thaw, but as a sudden breaking. Ice cracking on the river, snow melting in torrents, the world transforming overnight from white to brown to tentative green. Elena stood at the kitchen window watching the changes, her hands submerged in dishwater, her mind wandering to how much had shifted since winter. 2 months had passed since Cutter's visit, 2 months of careful peace and slow reconstruction. The boys were thriving in their studies, the ranch was recovering from the hard season, and the household had found a rhythm that felt almost natural. Almost. Because there was still the careful distance between her and Ronan, still the separate rooms and formal conversations, and the way they both pretended not to notice the other noticing. It was functional. It was safe. It was exactly what they'd agreed to. And it was starting to feel like a lie. "You're thinking loud again." Elena turned to find Ronan in the doorway, covered in mud from the morning's work. He'd been repairing fences all week, preparing for the cattle they'd soon move to summer pasture. "Sorry, just watching the snow melt. It's about time. Another week of winter, and I'd have lost my mind." He moved to the basin to wash his hands. "Boys still studying?" "Lucas is working on that surveying problem. Noah's supposedly writing an essay on animal migration, but is probably drawing pictures of wolves instead." Ronan's mouth twitched, the small smile that had become more frequent lately. "Sounds about right." He dried his hands, hesitated. "Can we talk?" Something in his tone made Elena's stomach tighten. "Of course." "Not here. Outside?" She followed him onto the porch, confused and increasingly nervous. Ronan rarely asked to talk privately. Their communication happened in the spaces between other things, over meals, during chores, in the brief moments when their paths crossed. Requesting an actual conversation felt ominous. He leaned against the railing, looking out over the land that was slowly coming back to life. "I've been thinking about something." "That's generally how thinking works." a small huff of amusement. Smart mouth. I forget that sometimes how you use humor when you're nervous. I'm not nervous. You're terrified. I can see it. He turned to face her fully. But you don't need to be. This is good news. At least, I think it is. Then just say it. Ronan took a breath. I want to go into town next week, to the land office, and I want you to come with me. Elena waited for more. When it didn't come, she prompted, Why? To put your name on the deed, as co-owner, legal and binding. Half the ranch becomes yours, not just in theory, but in actual fact. He said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. I should have done it after the wedding, but I was... Hell, I don't know what I was. Stupid, cautious, afraid you'd leave and I'd have to buy you out. But after what you did with Cutter, after watching you work yourself half to death to save this place. He trailed off, jaw working. You deserve to actually own what you're protecting. Elena stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. You want to give me half the ranch? Not give, recognize. You've earned it. Ronan, I've been here 4 months. That's not 4 months of keeping this family fed and clothed and educated, 4 months of turning a house into a home, 4 months of sacrificing pieces of yourself to keep us whole. His voice roughened. That's worth half of everything I own. More than half, honestly. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you'll come to town and make it official. He paused, then added quietly, Say you're planning to stay. The question beneath the question hung between them. Elena's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. I'm staying, she said. I thought that was clear by now. Nothing's clear with us. We're both too good at pretending. Ronan's eyes searched hers. But I need to know. Are you staying because you have nowhere else to go, or because you want to be here? It was the most direct he'd ever been, the most vulnerable. Elena could deflect, could give him an easy answer, but they'd built this family on brutal honesty, on saying the hard things even when they hurt. Both, she admitted. At first it was just survival, but now... She gestured helplessly at the land, the house, the world they'd created together. Now it's home. You're... She stopped, not sure how to finish. We're what? You're my family, you and the boys. Somehow, when I wasn't looking, you became the people I'd fight for, die for, if it came to it. The confession felt like standing naked in a blizzard. So yes, I'll go to town. I'll put my name on the deed, and I'll stay for as long as you'll have me. Ronan's expression shifted through several emotions too fast to track. Then he did something that shocked them both. He reached out and took her hand. Not a formal handshake, not an accidental brush, but an intentional, intimate gesture. Thank you, he said simply. They stood there, hands joined, while spring wind whispered around them and the world continued its slow transformation from death to life. The moment was shattered by Noah's voice from inside. Elena, Lucas says I spelled migration wrong, but I'm pretty sure I didn't and we need you to settle it. Ronan released her hand, stepping back to a more comfortable distance. But something in his eyes remained warm, open in a way Elena had never seen before. Duty calls, he said. Always does. But Elena was smiling as she turned to go inside. That night, after the boys were asleep, she found Ronan in his office sorting through paperwork. He looked up when she knocked. Can't sleep? Not yet. Can I come in? It's your house too. Elena entered, settling into the chair across from his desk. The office was purely functional, ledgers and maps, and the administrative detritus of running a ranch. No personal items except for one photograph on the corner of the desk. His first wife, young and smiling. I never asked about her, Elena said, nodding at the photo. Your wife, the boy's mother. Felt like overstepping. Ronan's hand moved unconsciously toward the frame, then stopped. Catherine. Her name was Catherine. What was she like? Everything I'm not. Warm, patient, good with people. She could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with a dozen friends. His voice went soft with memory. She made everything better just by being there. And when she got sick, you don't have to talk about it. Maybe I need to. He leaned back, eyes distant. It was consumption. Took 2 years to kill her, 2 years of watching her fade. By the end, she couldn't breathe without pain, couldn't hold the boys without exhausting herself. But she never complained, never asked why her, why us, just kept loving us even as she died. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry, but sorry doesn't bring her back. He focused on Elena again. After she died, I thought I was done. Done with feeling anything, done with hoping for anything, done with letting anyone close enough to hurt me. I became exactly what you saw when you arrived, a cold bastard more interested in survival than living. You're not that person anymore. No, because you wouldn't let me be. He stood, moving to the window. You walked into this house with nothing but determination and refused to accept the emptiness I'd built. You fought for the boys when I was too broken to see they needed fighting for. You saved this ranch when I would have let it burn rather than ask for help. And you did it all while expecting nothing in return except a place to sleep and food to eat. That's not true. I expected safety, stability, a future, which I gave you. But you gave me something I didn't even know I'd lost. Ronan turned to face her, his expression raw in the lamplight. You gave me back my family, my sons who laugh now instead of just existing, this house that feels alive again, and myself, the version of me that isn't just going through motions but actually living. Elena's throat tightened. Ronan, I know what we agreed. I know this is supposed to be practical, emotionless, just a transaction. But somewhere along the way it stopped being that for me. And I need to know if it stopped being that for you too. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and terrifying and absolutely undeniable. Elena stood, crossed to where he stood by the window. This close, she could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes from squinting into sun and wind, the small scar above his left eyebrow from some long-ago accident. It stopped being a transaction the moment I met your sons, she said quietly. Maybe even before that. Maybe the moment you carried me in from the cold instead of leaving me to die at your gate. I just didn't want to admit it because admitting it meant being vulnerable, and I'd promised myself I was done being vulnerable. And now? Now I'm terrified, because I didn't come here looking for love. I came looking for survival, but somehow survival turned into caring, and caring turned into something deeper. And now I'm standing here realizing I've fallen in love with a man who married me out of convenience. Ronan's breath caught. Elena, I love you, she said, the words tumbling out now that she'd started. I love your stupid stoicism and your terrible communication skills and the way you pretend not to care while caring more than anyone I've ever met. I love how you are with your sons, awkward and gruff, but so deeply devoted it makes my chest hurt. I love this ranch and this life and the person I'm becoming in it. And I love you, Ronan Hale, even though that wasn't part of our deal. Silence. Ronan stared at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. Then slowly his hand came up to cup her face. The deal changed the moment you walked through that door, he said roughly. I just didn't have the courage to admit it. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I love you too. Fought it for months. Told myself it was just gratitude or convenience, or anything except what it actually was. But I love you, Elena. Your strength, your stubbornness, your refusal to accept anything less than the truth. The way you see me, really see me, and haven't run yet. The way you love my boys like they're yours. The way you made a house I couldn't bear to live in into a home I never want to leave. We're both idiots, Elena whispered. Absolutely. And then he kissed her. It was nothing like their wedding, no witnesses, no formality, no sense of obligation. Just two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and somehow made it work, finally admitting what had been growing between them for months. When they finally pulled apart, Ronan rested his forehead against hers. So where does this leave us? He asked. I don't know. Do we tell the boys, change the sleeping arrangements? Have an actual marriage instead of a business partnership? All of that sounds terrifying. Everything worth doing is terrifying. Ronan laughed, a real laugh, full and genuine. When did you get so wise? I've always been this wise. You just weren't paying attention. They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, before Ronan said, We should probably take this slow. The boys have been through enough changes. We don't need to rush into... Papa? They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Lucas stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Lucas, Ronan started, how long have you been... Long enough. The boy crossed his arms. So you two finally figured it out. Figured what out? Elena asked weakly. That you're in love. We've known for weeks. Noah bet me you'd admit it by spring. Looks like he won. Ronan and Elena exchanged glances. You knew? We're not blind. You look at each other like... Lucas struggled for words. Like Mama used to look at Papa before she got sick. And we talked about it, Noah and me, whether we'd be okay with it, with you two being really married instead of just pretending. And? Elena hardly dared breathe. Lucas shrugged, but there was warmth in his eyes. Noah said Mama would want Papa to be happy, and I said you're not Mama, but you're not trying to be, and that's actually better, so yeah, we're okay with it, more than okay. He paused. Does this mean you're moving into Papa's room? Because if so, I'm taking your old room. It's bigger than the one I share with Noah. Despite everything, Elena laughed. We haven't gotten that far in planning yet. Well, get there. And maybe have another kid or two so Noah and I aren't so outnumbered. We could use some allies in this family. He left before either adult could respond, leaving them staring after him in shock. Did our son just give us permission to have more children? Ronan asked. I think he did. And possibly gave us relationship advice? That too. They looked at each other and burst into laughter, the kind that came from relief and joy and the sheer absurdity of their situation. The next week they rode into town together, all four of them, because the boys insisted on coming. At the land office, Elena signed the papers that made her half owner of the ranch, her hand steady despite the enormity of what it meant. She owned land now, real property, security that couldn't be taken away on someone else's whim. Afterwards, Ronan surprised her by leading them to the small church where they'd been married. What are we doing here? Elena asked. Getting married? Again. Properly this time. Reverend Pike greeted them with his usual gruff humor. Back so soon? The first one didn't take? It took, Ronan said. We're just doing it better this time. The ceremony was simple, but genuine. The boys served as witnesses, standing proud beside their father. And when Pike asked if they took each other for love, not just convenience, they both answered yes without hesitation. The kiss that sealed it was longer this time, more certain. And when they pulled apart, Noah was crying happy tears, while Lucas tried very hard to look unaffected and failed completely. You're really my mother now, Noah said, hugging Elena tightly. I've been your mother for months, sweetheart. This just makes it official. Can I call you Mama, or is that weird since you're not... You can call me whatever feels right to you. Mama, then. He said it like testing the word, then smiled. Mama. Lucas hung back, still processing. Elena caught his eye, gave him space to feel whatever he needed to feel. After a moment, he stepped forward. I'm not calling you Mama, he said. Elena's fine, but... He took a breath. But I'm glad you're staying, for real this time. Me too, Elena said, pulling him into a hug he only half resisted. They rode home as a family, laughing and talking, the boys arguing about who got which room and whether they should get a dog and what they wanted for dinner. Ronan's hand found Elena's, squeezing gently. No regrets? He asked quietly. Only that we wasted so much time pretending. We needed that time. To build trust, to become a family. This wouldn't have worked if we'd forced it earlier. Always so practical. Someone has to be, since you're clearly the romantic one. Elena snorted, says the man who just orchestrated a surprise second wedding. What can I say? You're a terrible influence. That night, after the boys were finally asleep in their newly arranged rooms, Elena stood in the doorway of what had been Ronan's bedroom and was now theirs. He was already there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. We don't have to rush this, he said. If you need more time, Ronan, stop talking. She crossed to him, and this time when they came together, it was without fear or hesitation. This was her husband, her home, her future, and she was finally, completely his. The following weeks brought a different kind of peace to the ranch. Spring advanced into summer, bringing with it long days of hard work and longer evenings of contentment. Elena and Ronan learned to navigate actual marriage. The fights over small things, the compromise, the daily choice to love each other even when it was hard. The boys thrived, their lessons expanding, their laughter more frequent. And then, one morning in late June, everything changed again. Elena woke to the sound of dogs barking, the same aggressive warning that had preceded Cutter's arrival. Her heart stopped. They'd paid the debt. What could those men possibly want now? She and Ronan reached the window at the same time, looking out to see not 5 riders but nearly a dozen, and these men looked even more dangerous than Cutter's crew. "Wake the boys," Ronan said quietly. "Get them to the root cellar. Lock it from inside." "I'm not hiding." "Elena, please, this isn't like before. Those are Pike's men, and if they're here, it's not to collect debt." He grabbed the rifle. "It's to take the ranch by force. So please, for the love of everything, get our son somewhere safe and stay there until I come for you." The fear in his voice was unmistakable. Elena nodded, already moving toward the boys' rooms. But as she woke Lucas and Noah, she was thinking, planning. Remembering Ronan's words from months ago about the rifle above the mantel being loaded. She got the boys into the root cellar with instructions to stay quiet no matter what they heard. Then, instead of joining them, she locked them in from the outside and returned to the house. Ronan was on the porch, rifle aimed at the lead rider, a man even bigger and meaner looking than Cutter. "Ronan Hale," the man called. "Been looking forward to meeting you. Name's Garrett. I work for Mr. Pike. You know why I'm here?" "No idea. We paid the debt." "You paid Cutter's debt. But see, Cutter was operating on his own terms, making side deals. Pike never authorized forgiveness. He wants his full amount, $800 plus 6 months of interest. Comes to about $1,100 now." Elena felt ice flood her veins. This was a setup. Pike had sent Cutter with one deal, then sent Garrett to collect a different debt. It was a trap designed to take the ranch no matter what Ronan did. "I don't have $1,100, Ronan said steadily. "Then we'll take it in land. Say, this whole ranch seems about worth it. You and your family can leave peacefully, or we can make it unpleasant. Your choice." "My choice is you get the hell off my property before I start shooting," Garrett smiled. "1 rifle against 12 men? I like those odds." This was it. This was the moment where everything could fall apart, where the family they'd built could be destroyed by men who saw violence as just another business tool. Elena made a decision. She stepped onto the porch, carrying the second rifle she'd retrieved from inside. "Elena," Ronan started. "Make it 2 rifles against 12 men, she said calmly. "I'm a terrible shot, but at this range, I'll hit something." Garrett's attention shifted to her. "Well now, the wife wants to play hero?" "The wife wants to protect her home, same as her husband." "Noble. Stupid, but noble." Garrett's hand moved toward his gun. "Last chance. Leave peacefully or die here." "What's it gonna be?" In the tense silence that followed, Elena heard something that changed everything. The sound of more horses approaching. Many more. She risked a glance and felt hope surge through her chest. At least 20 riders were cresting the hill, led by Reverend Pike, and followed by what looked like every neighboring rancher within a day's ride. Garrett heard them too, his expression shifting from confidence to concern. Pike rode straight through Garrett's men, scattering them, and pulled up beside Ronan's porch. "Sorry we're late," the Reverend said. "Had to gather the neighbors. Got your message yesterday about Pike's men planning to take your ranch. Figured you could use backup." Elena glanced at Ronan, confused. He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "I might have sent word when I heard rumors about Garrett coming. Called in every favor I had. These are good men. We look out for each other out here." The neighboring ranchers surrounded Garrett's crew, rifles visible and ready. The odds had shifted dramatically. Pike addressed Garrett directly. "Now, I don't know what lies your boss told you, but Ronan Hale paid his debt in full. I witnessed it, and we don't take kindly to claim jumpers and fraudsters in this territory. So you can ride back to wherever you came from and tell your Mr. Pike that if he has a problem, he can take it up with me and every rancher in a 50-mile radius." Garrett looked at the assembled force, calculating odds, and finding them unacceptable. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is," Ronan said. "And if any of Pike's men show up on my land again, they'll leave in a box. That's not a threat. That's a promise." For a long moment, violence hung in the balance. Then Garrett jerked his horse's reins and rode out, his men following. The threat wasn't gone. Men like Pike didn't forget slights, but it was deferred. As the neighbors dispersed with promises to check in regularly, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe. "You planned that," she said to Ronan. "The whole time you had backup coming. I've learned from you. Ask for help before the crisis, not during." He pulled her close. "But I didn't expect you to come out here. I told you to stay with the boys. And I ignored you. We're partners, Ronan. Equal partners. That means I fight beside you, not behind you." He looked at her for a long moment, then kissed her forehead. "I'm never going to win an argument with you, am I? Not a chance." They retrieved the boys from the root cellar, explaining what had happened. Lucas looked at Elena with newfound respect. "You stood up to 12 armed men?" "Your father was standing up to them. I just joined him." "Still, that's pretty brave, for a teacher." "For anyone," Ronan corrected. "Your mother's the bravest person I know." Elena's heart swelled at the casual way he said it. Your mother. Not Elena, not my wife, but mother. The title she'd earned through love and sacrifice, and the daily choice to show up for these boys. That night, as they lay in bed together, Ronan traced patterns on her shoulder. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous habit." "About what Lucas said. About more children." Elena stilled. "And I think I'd like that. If you would. Building something new together, not just preserving what was." He propped himself up on one elbow. "But only if you want it. No pressure. You've already given us so much." Elena thought about it, about tiny hands and sleepless nights and the beautiful chaos of growing their family, about creating life in this harsh place, about hope and continuity and legacy. "I'd like that too," she said. "Not right now, but someday, when we're ready." "Someday," Ronan agreed, and kissed her. The seasons turned. Summer faded to autumn, autumn to winter, and winter back to spring again. The threats from Pike never materialized. Apparently word had spread about what happened, and even claim jumpers thought twice about targeting a ranch protected by every neighbor within riding distance. Elena's garden flourished. The boys grew taller, smarter, more confident. Lucas started talking about veterinary college, inspired by Noah's endless animal questions. Noah declared he wanted to be a teacher like his mother, which made Elena cry happy tears for an hour. And one day in early summer, Elena realized she was late. Very late. She told Ronan on an evening when the boys were at a neighbor's ranch for a gathering. He was reading in bed, glasses perched on his nose, a detail that still made her smile, this rough rancher needing reading glasses. "I think I'm pregnant," she said without preamble. The book fell from his hands. "You think?" "Pretty sure. I'll know for certain in a few weeks, but all the signs are there." Ronan pulled her into his arms, his face buried in her hair. She felt him shaking and realized he was crying. This stoic man who rarely showed emotion was crying. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a second chance at this. At family, at love, at everything. Thank me after the baby arrives and we're both exhausted and covered in spit up." He laughed through tears. "Deal." When they told the boys, Lucas groaned dramatically, while Noah whooped with excitement. "Finally!" Noah exclaimed. "We're going to be the best big brothers." "We're going to be exhausted big brothers," Lucas corrected, but he was smiling. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer and fall. Elena worked right up until the last weeks, teaching the boys, managing the house, helping with lighter ranch work despite Ronan's protests. The neighboring women rallied around her, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, and the kind of community support that made frontier life possible. And on a cold January night, with a midwife in attendance and Ronan gripping her hand hard enough to bruise, Elena gave birth to a daughter. They named her Catherine, after Ronan's first wife. It felt right, honoring the woman who'd come before, acknowledging that this new life was built on the foundation of what had been lost. The boys were enchanted with their baby sister, Lucas holding her with surprising gentleness, while Noah sang to her in an off-key voice that somehow worked. As Elena recovered, lying in bed with her daughter sleeping on her chest, and her husband beside her, and her sons arguing quietly in the hallway about whose turn it was to watch the baby, she felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. This was nothing like the life she'd imagined for herself. Not the career she'd planned, not the marriage she'd dreamed of, not the future she'd envisioned. It was better. Because she'd learned that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about finding reasons to live. And she'd found hers in this impossible family, on this unforgiving land with a man who'd started as a stranger and become her everything. "What are you thinking about?" Ronan asked, his voice soft. "That I almost didn't knock on your gate that night. That I almost gave up and let the cold take me." "Don't." His arm tightened around her. "Don't think about that." "I have to, because it makes this more precious. Knowing how close I came to missing all of it, you, the boys, this life, our daughter, it makes me grateful for every single day." "Even the hard ones?" "Especially the hard ones. They're proof we're alive, that we're fighting, that we matter." Ronan kissed her temple. "You matter more than you know. You saved me, Elena. Saved all of us. Turned a house of ghosts into a home full of life." "We saved each other. That's how it works." Outside, spring was beginning its slow arrival. Soon the snow would melt, the grass would green, and another cycle of planting and growing and harvesting would begin. There would be hard work ahead, challenges and setbacks, and probably more threats from men who saw weakness where there was actually strength. But they'd face it together, as a family, as partners, as people who'd chosen each other not once but every day, in 1,000 small ways. Lucas poked his head in. "Noah wants to sing to Catherine again. Should I let him, or is that child abuse?" Elena laughed. "Let him. She seems to like it." "She's a baby. She doesn't know any better." But Lucas was smiling as he retreated. Through the window, Elena could see the land stretching out in all directions, wild and beautiful and harsh and home. This ranch that she'd nearly died reaching, that she'd fought to save, that was now as much hers as anyone's. She'd come here with nothing, a disgraced teacher, alone and desperate and half-frozen. She'd made a bargain with a cold man in a colder house, expecting only survival. Instead, she'd found love, family, purpose, a future worth fighting for. The baby stirred against her chest, making small sounds of contentment. Ronan's breathing evened out into sleep, exhausted from his vigil during the birth. And somewhere in the house, her sons were arguing over whose turn it was to fetch wood, their voices carrying the kind of comfortable bickering that only came from security and love. Elena closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to rest. She'd survived. They all had. And in surviving, they'd built something extraordinary, a family forged through ice and fire, desperation and choice, loss and love. This was her legacy now. Not lessons taught in a classroom, but children raised with love. Not words written in books, but a life lived fully and fiercely. Not comfort and ease, but challenge and growth, and the deep satisfaction of knowing she'd made a difference. The frontier had tried to break her. Instead, she'd broken it to her will, claimed her place in it, and made it home. And as she drifted into sleep surrounded by the people she loved, Elena Cross Hale, teacher, wife, mother, survivor, smiled. Because against all odds, against every expectation, she'd won. Not by escaping, but by staying. Not by giving up, but by fighting. Not by being safe, but by being brave. And in the end, that made all the difference.